It's another hot, sunny day today here in Southern California.
An earlier incarnation of the movie, it was conceived of as an under $1 million movie, and it still began with a giant freeway dance number.
Okay. Action.
It was really important to me, especially in this day and age with musicals, to declare our intention right off the bat. I wanted to make sure that within the first 5 minutes of the movie, you know you're watching a musical, and you know what kind of a musical it is. That was the logic behind not only starting with a musical number, but in a way starting with the most musical-esque number that you could imagine. It was to really have a big, loud cannon blast, so you better be careful, and you better leave now if you're not okay with that.
You still know me, climb these hills, I'm reaching for the heights, and chasing all the lights that shine.
Any musical isn't precisely the real world because people don't generally burst out into song when they're in the middle of a freeway.
There's something fascinating about traffic in Los Angeles. It's one thing that's really unique about LA is this utter reliance and dependence on these individual moving units. It's part of what makes LA very lonely, I think, as a city, or at least can be incredibly lonely. But it's also, I think, part of what makes LA such a kind of crazy haven for dreamers. What are you doing? You're playing music, or you're listening to the radio or something. You're in a little bit of a bubble universe, and there's a way that you can kind of disconnect from the outside world when you're in your car, especially when you're in your car in bad traffic for an hour. That idea really spoke to the idea of this meeting point of dreamers, and that each dreamer has their own dream. Each person lives their own song. We each live in our own musical universe. We each have our own musical movie inside us, whether we think it or not. We are going to literally use the car radios as a building tapestry to build into a full-blown piece of music that everyone, one by one, organically, on this freeway, is going to join into.
There have been 100 different ways that we've said we'd skin it, and this is definitely the most ambitious and largest possible version that one could shoot.
There was never really a doubt in my mind, but there's something to be said for willful naivete and for just kind of saying that something's gonna be, you're gonna be able to do something, and that means you are gonna be able to do it. That was, in some way, how I kind of justified it in my mind for years and years, where I think most sane people would kind of tell us that there was no way we could shut down a freeway.
LA is actually often very cooperative when it comes to making an encouraging film, including the ability to take a ramp of a freeway in downtown Los Angeles and shut it down.
They were incredibly accommodating in letting us bring as much equipment as we could that we needed to be on the interchange near us.
Even when we were on an $800,000 budget, you know, theoretically, I thought, sure, why not?
We were under strict regulations and rules, but nonetheless, we found a ramp that still allowed for traffic around it.
One of the first things that I got the most giddy about was the fact that he wanted to shoot this like old style, no edits, if any. So it's like Birdman meets Singing in the Rain.
Dance is happening around you.
Came to the point of like, oh my God, how do we do this?
That truly three-dimensional, almost kind of virtual reality sort of idea really excited me.
It's a modern way of thinking where the camera could be more fluid than it used to be.
We were going to weave around cars, we were going to weave in and out of different pockets of dance.
Like the movements could be even more dancing with the dancers.
We were going to get a glimpse of the above, but then go back down into more intimate moments, and then get back wide and back close again. That the whole thing was going to live and breathe like an organism.
When Damien talked about the photography in the film, he said that he didn't want the film to feel like it was like just shot with coverage. Other than every single shot has to have like a purpose in the film.
And to be able to do that in a long take, to me, it was a way of trying to truly capture what it might feel like to be in this traffic jam, standing in the middle of it, having this thing unfurl around you.
We had to figure out what is the path, what is the scene of the actual dance as well. You know, how does it go from point A to point B to C, and does it make sense?
The choreography of the camera in those moments feels like fluid and really like another part of the dance crew, you know, that is also dancing.
You're not experiencing it in a kind of chaotic, sort of herky-jerky way. You're experiencing it as though you're guided by the most fluid, musical sort of piece of camera movement that you can imagine. In other words, it's just magic. It has no real correlation to real life.
It's about finding the root 7 moves and creating an entire number out of these like 7 movements. You know, making sure that that felt exciting enough to get to a point where every person's on the car. That last combination where everyone's on the cars, we had about 60 versions of that.
There was like 3 days where we basically set up shop at Riverfront Studios and lined up our own cars to like work this all out.
We named the cars and figuring out who's standing on what car and what car had to be reinforced so you could stand on it.
I think the cars were supposed to be in the other direction so that we looked from the front when we closed the doors. But we ended up turning them around because of the way we wanted to end that scene with the camera.
It took a really long time to rehearse. It was totally logistical nightmare, but completely amazing and like epic.
The logistics were just incredible.
Damien had moved around with the camera a lot.
And I had done a rehearsal beforehand when we just had dancers in a parking lot. Me with my iPhone doing the camera movement.
I hear them every day. The rhythms in the canyons that'll never fade away. Ballads in the barrooms that find.
And a lot of discussion about, you know, can we get on this freeway prior to actually shooting on Saturday, Sunday?
We shut it down for 3 days, 1 day for rehearsal, 2 days for shooting.
The freeway had never been shot down for that amount of time.
And it all seemed like it was going to work wonderfully.
The morning of our first rehearsal on the freeway ramp was incredibly beautiful to get here so early in the morning and watch the sunrise in Los Angeles. That was such a treat.
But it's a different story when you get on an actual freeway ramp with lots of cars and actual camera equipment.
Without that rehearsal, we would have been dead in the water.
That we had a lot of technical challenges because of the way he wanted to shoot the film.
The day of rehearsal on Another Day of Sun was deeply, deeply disheartening.
Each department learned so much about what needed to happen the day that we shot.
We couldn't just do this all on Steadicam. This had to be, in large part, a crane-operated camera move in order to slide over cars, get high when we needed to, et cetera, et cetera.
There was a lot of work with the choreography of the camera.
Suddenly you find yourself just kind of banging your head against what's possible and what's practical.
The camera wasn't exactly able to do what we thought it was going to do.
The camera can't move as fast as you want it to move, or it tries to move fast and then it becomes this close to knocking someone's head off.
Technically, that's obviously quite tricky.
Suddenly, you know, the dancers can't go in this direction the way they did in the parking lot because the ramp is slanted. You know, everything is just kind of like this, and the whole thing is you know, literally the whole thing is like this. So should the camera be adapting to the slant of the ramp so that everything is flat, or should it be true to the horizon so that everything is slanted?
We had to change some of the choreography.
Luckily, we did a lot of rehearsals so we could figure those things out.
These kind of things that you never thought were really going to be things you had to think about, you suddenly find yourself in baking heat on the freeway ramp and you realize you have 10 hours to figure all of this out because then your rehearsal day's over.
I had to recast people because certain people didn't fit what should be happening in the frame.
I ended the rehearsal day feeling like the number was going to be a disaster.
We can do this. It's going to be possible to make it. It's just the way there. It's really, really difficult, and you have to figure it out.
And then we showed up to actually shoot. The first day, showing up all incredibly nervous, more nervous than we'd been before the rehearsal because, you know, we realized how difficult this was going to be.
Me and Damien and Mandy and anyone in the crew involved in the shot would really feel like it's not there. It's not there, and you feel like this is never, ever going to be possible to nail.
So by the time we'd get into the dozens and dozens of takes, you know, we could start to see that maybe this number would cut together. And then we showed up the second day, we had 2 days to shoot it, and the sky was literally the most thunderously overcast sky I've ever seen in LA. We show up at 7 a.m. and of course everyone's saying, you know, oh, it's just morning, it's, you know, the layer, it's gonna burn off. It's supposed to burn off by 9 a.m. 9 a.m. rolls around, hasn't burned off.
I can permit a freeway, but I can't permit the sunshine.
10 a.m. rolls around and hasn't burned off. The song is called Another Day of Sun. The lighting was literally supposed to be harsh sunlit glare. And we wait. Finally, at like noon, the sun starts to break off, and by that point, we've rehearsed a lot. We can start getting more takes. I was ridiculously lucky and spoiled with this crew and these dancers who did take after take in literally the hottest day of the year. There was a heat advisory warning for both days that we were shooting on this ramp.
I'm dying. I'm melting.
The traffic dancers in particular, they are like the unsung heroes, I feel like, of this film, because The conditions alone, you know, just being on a freeway in almost 100-degree weather, and then having to dance on cars.
And they're on top cars that become literally like burning ovens.
There were some dancers that weren't as prone to sweating as others, but some of the men in particular, like they were going through, we just had like 3 or 4 shirts and we'd be hanging them on cars trying to get it dry.
We brought umbrellas, we brought sunscreen, we brought hats, we brought anything you can imagine to stay cool in this heat because it's hot.
And I asked them to do crazy stuff. So the fact that they were able to, like, time after time, take after take, I was able to depend on them, meant so much to me.
The whole thing was like this close to being an utter disastrous train wreck and somehow got pulled off.
And I created what I think is an exciting, energetic, and eye-opening opening to our film.
It's another day of sun.
I initially wrote La-La Land way before Whiplash. What I was really interested in, what I'm still interested in, is how do you take the traditional Hollywood-style musical, which is the most artificial genre that exists in a way. How do you take that and marry it to real life? How do you use that genre to really say something about what it feels like to live life, live everyday life, the kind of everyday emotions and heartbreaks and hopes and yearnings that we all go through? And how do you convince anyone to do an original musical from a newbie director, a newbie composer, to make exactly the movie that we conceived of for La-La Land?
Action.
My old college roommate, Justin, was writing the music with me as I was writing the script.
I'm not sure how we got the crazy idea to start working on musicals, but they were just sort of the movies that were inspiring us a lot during college.
Together we had this full musical script and all the songs and all the score before Whiplash was even a thing.
Damien and I are both musicians. We met in a band, so our relationship has always revolved around music, and we love movies that can be sort of large musical pieces in and of themselves.
And someday as I sing the song, a small town kid will come along. That'll be the thing to push him on and go.
So it was actually, in part, out of frustration of not being able to get this passion project off the ground that I wrote Whiplash, which was a much smaller, easier to get off the ground piece.
Damien told me during Whiplash that he'd had this other idea even before Whiplash, and we talked about it just sort of as a general concept of something he fantasized about being able to make someday.
I wrote it specifically in order to get something off the ground quickly, and in a way, in order to ultimately be able to make La La Land.
We didn't have the cast that we have now, so it was definitely something that we all kind of looked at each other and said, we want to do this, but we're gonna have to be patient. And simultaneously, Damien was going out with the script for Whiplash.
A lot was riding on that film, and it's hard to imagine that kind of lightning in a bottle striking, and I think that is a huge credit to why we have the people and the toys and the confidence behind this film that we do today.
I knew I had to do something to convince people that I could make La La Land. So I made Whiplash, and thankfully it kind of did the job I wanted to do, which was let me make La La Land. La La Land, I wanted to explore how you balance life and art, how you balance dreams and reality. As an artist myself, as someone who moved to LA young and was trying to make it, had big dreams, there's a real balancing act between those dreams and reality.
It was just so intoxicating, the idea of this really modern story of two struggling artists and dreamers in this sort of 50s musical world version of Los Angeles.
Lady, why you be tripping like that?
No, Jamal. You be trippin'.
Justin and I, very, very early on, started talking about what it would be like to make a musical together. It was a long process getting people on board with making this movie, and myself, Justin, Fred Berger, and Jordan Horowitz, the two producers that we developed the movie with initially, starting back in 2010, all of us were sort of banging on the doors for a long time and trying to kind of convince people that this could be a thing.
That's exactly why Jordan and I and Damien were drawn to this, is because it had no chance of getting made. It should not be made in the current financial landscape of how movies are made, and that's why it's worth devoting, for us, 5+ years of our time to. So so far, and by the time this comes out, probably about seven or more.
The movie is about passion, and it's about passion for art and passion for love, and ultimately the passion with which we wanted to approach the movie, with which we wrote it, with which we composed the music for it, with which we presented it to people, and with which we intended to put it on screen. I'd like to think that kind of wound up infecting people.
City of stars, are you shining just for me?
Damien had me from hello, really. I'm a great admirer of musicals, and I'm a great admirer of talent and voices and writers and actors and filmmakers who have something to say and a particular way of saying it.
That's our cue to start pushing in just a little bit slightly, which can then help gain us ground. We all are infected by this idea that you could reimagine these great old movies that we kind of like to think, you know, well, they never make them like that anymore. That you could take those dreams of movies that we've experienced either as children or at other parts of our lives that are so formative for us and put them onto a movie that still felt contemporary, that still felt real, that still felt urgent. I wanted to really do it the 1940s, 1950s Hollywood way, make it feel like a Technicolor CinemaScope epic about a city that is very epic unto itself, a widescreen city, shoot it widescreen, and make it sort of as big and spectacular to me as the old Hollywood musicals felt.
Those are the musicals that I love the most, the Gene Kelly musicals. Musicals from the 30s and 40s, sort of in that Fred and Ginger era.
Once Fred and Ginger started doing their kind of high point musicals like Top Hat and Swing Time, once Gene Kelly started transforming how dance was filmed on screen, I became very interested in this idea of how do you film bodies in motion, how do you use color and music and sets and costumes and all these kind of elements, these expressionistic elements of old school movie making, how do you use those to tell a story?
And then you put Damien in the room to talk about the film, because he lives and breathes, before the film is shot, he lives and breathes every shot of the film. He feels every frame and he can communicate it.
And his passion and encyclopedic knowledge of those movies, we felt like if there was a voice who could actually pull this movie off, it would be him. And this was years before he'd written Whiplash.
Everyone from the medic to the assistant directors to the design teams to get to work on a musical and with this filmmaker is an opportunity nobody wanted to pass up.
That was the hope all along, but it took a while to kind of, you know, get people over the hump.
But I'm frankly feeling nothing.
Is that so?
Or it could be less than nothing.
I've been a movie-obsessed person my whole life, so there's no shortage of films, filmmakers that I love to steal from any chance I can get. When it comes to musicals, Stanley Donen, Vincent Minnelli, you know, are some of the obvious iconic figures of the musical, and especially how, I'd say, how Vincent Minnelli used color and how Stanley Donen used camera movement.
Musicals like Singing in the Rain and American in Paris, Bandwagon.
So from here you can start pushing in. It's really Donen and Gene Kelly really together who kind of figured out this new way of integrating the camera into dance numbers, so it wasn't just like going to a theater and sitting down and watching a vaudevillian perform on stage. It was a much more three-dimensional endeavor. I learned a lot from that, and I learned a lot from the French answer to those musicals, which were the Jacques Demy musicals of the 60s.
We became really sort of die-hard fans of The Umbrellas of Cherbourg and The Young Girls of Rochefort.
Those three filmmakers kind of loom very large in my head, but there's lots of other directors who wormed their way into La-La Land in some capacity.
We basically wrote the film and developed the film in a vacuum, where we said, what is the absolute greatest version of this movie, ignoring budget, ignoring realities, ignoring anything about the industry, and said, let's just make our dream version of a contemporary original musical.
And sort of threw caution to the wind and just kind of kept developing into that world, somewhat recklessly, because we sort of knew that there was not really an explicit endgame.
The irony is that my vision for this movie remained really consistent over the 6 years it took to get it made, regardless of where we were in terms of budget or cast or practical parameters.
We are very lucky to have a backer who's given us the resources we need to make the absolute 100% version of this movie with no compromises, and that is frankly something we never expected to be able to do.
I just heard you play, and I wanted to see.
The script, even in its earliest stages, indicated where the songs were, what the songs were about. A lot of the larger ideas were in there from the very, very beginning. The idea that the movie starts with a huge number on the freeway where all these dreamers are singing about why they came to this town.
And that was page one, and that has been page one since the first draft of the script.
The idea of this big, sort of grand, lush orchestral waltz that takes place in Griffith Observatory, that was in the original screenplay and treatment. The idea that the movie ends with this big fantasy ballet where me and Sebastian, Emma and Ryan's characters, relive their romance in an alternate universe and make different choices and end up together.
We were allowed to make exactly the movie that we conceived of back in 2010, you know, that's based on exactly the ideas that Justin and I were starting to work out back in 2006. The guy jumping in the pool still happened, the camera going to the trumpet, the giant painted sets for 20 minutes at the end of the movie, all of that was still there. It was pretty much 95% what's on screen. That's either just utter naive stupidity on my part, or it was a certain kind of feeling that we would make it be. That very early on when we were writing and when we were making the music, and obviously this was music that was orchestrated intentionally for a 90-piece orchestra, which is also not cheap, we very consciously made the decision to write and conceive and imagine the ideal version of this movie. Craziest thing about the whole journey for me, kind of sitting here now, having just finished the movie, is that it sounds cheesy, but that dream came true. It's exactly that movie without any compromises, and I think we all kind of realistically expected there to be some compromises. Just because, you know, when does real life ever live up to, to the fantasy?
City of stars, are you shining just for me? City of stars, there's so much that I can't see. Who knows? I felt it from the first embrace I shared with you, that now my dreams are dreams I'll make true. City of stars, just one thing everybody wants. There in the bars and through the smokescreen of the crowded restaurants. Oh love, I'm glad I figured out what all the songs were for. The rush, the glance, the touch, the trance, the look in somebody's eyes, to light up the skies, to open the world and send it reeling. The voice that says I'll be here and you'll be okay. I don't care if I know just where I will go, 'cause all that I need's this lovely feeling, the rat-tat-tat on my heart. I think it's come here to stay. Are you shining just for me? City of stars, are you shining just for me? City of stars, you've never shone so brightly.
When I read the script, I think the epilogue was what, more than anything, made me want to be part of this.
We just need to be painting more right words.
Very elegant ending in this film.
The epilogue sequence is a huge part of the film, and that was one of Damien's big ideas going back to the first treatment.
It was really important to me that we end with at least 10-minute dream ballet.
From here you can start pushing in.
Yeah. The epilogue number stemmed from just two almost unrelated desires on my part. I knew that I wanted the movie to end with them not together, but seeing each other again after some time had passed. In that case, I was chasing the umbrellas of Cherbourg. It's my favorite movie ending of all time. The other thing I definitely wanted to do, because why the hell doesn't anyone do this anymore, was do a giant dream ballet. It's incredible to think today that the dream ballet was actually a thing in Hollywood. Mainstream Hollywood studio movies would do this as a regular thing in the 50s and 60s. It's not just American in Paris, it's The Bandwagon, it's Sin in the Rain, it's A Star is Born. It's this incredible moment in movie history where the pinnacle of like commercial, business-minded, Hollywood factory system movie making coincided with the most avant-garde, experimental approach to cinema you can possibly imagine. And it's never happened since in movie history.
Action!
Once you decide you want both those endings, then it's, well, how do you have both those endings? And so that's where the idea of letting the dream ballet actually really be a dream and be a what if during the moment where they run into each other after many years apart.
It's an amazing chance to sort of see the alternate reality of how everything could have gone.
We go back through me and Sebastian's entire relationship where they make different choices and they ultimately end up together.
It's this homage to those older musicals.
Ready, music.
Where you would see these sensational explorations of love and creativity that you don't really see very often in films anymore.
Very sort of abstract, colorful, painted sets. It's such an interesting juxtaposition of really lo-fi, Super 16 sort of home video footage of a life that might have been mixed with this like Technicolor, old-fashioned musical sensibility.
The art department did such a beautiful job of the set, and it was so inspiring.
He wanted to go into this montage and fantasy world when they go into a studio lot and end up kind of dancing and walking through a heightened LA world. He wanted certain beats. You would bring the actors out of a doorway and they would go through an orange grove and then they would go through the Santa Monica Pier, and so we took other iconic Los Angeles elements like the freeway system and then we just blended them into this mural.
That backdrop is very much influenced by Bandwagon when Fred Astaire is walking into that set.
That was then created with painted backdrops and also theatrical cutout scenery that was not trying to be too real looking. Then that was printed into a 25-foot high by 140-foot long mural, which then the actors dance in front of.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 10, 2, 3, 4, stop.
I got 30 dancers, come on. And they got to be characters, and they got to really dance and hit lines. I mean, I got to just dance them. I do think that it was a little bit of like one-upping each other, you know, it was like they'd have an idea and then I'd do something dance-wise and then they'd add something, I'd be like, oh, that's cool, let's do this, you know, and I think that's why that ended up so magical. And then of course Ryan and Emma, you stick them into the middle of it and them being incredible actors. It was just, I thought, a really beautiful scene.
The LA epilogue, what are we gonna do there? We didn't want to repeat any of the colors that we had used in any of the other big dance numbers, and we landed on purple and then decided on the cream for him. It was always written that there were only 2 changes, one for the LA epilogue and one change for the Paris epilogue. The Paris epilogue was scripted that it was like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers in Swing Time. That was the inspiration for her dress, and we knew we wanted it to be T-length for her, and we always knew cream. And we didn't want Sebastian in a tux, but he did want him in a black suit.
It's like the color is gone and we've matured.
The Walk on the Seine, the Arc de Triomphe, it started as a watercolor painting, and then they were heightened to Damien's taste. We worked on conceptualizing it from the very beginning until the day before we were shooting.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
The Paris waltz is basically Mia and Sebastian's final dance. Damien wanted it like the Beauty and the Beast waltz, where it's like kind of bird's eye looking down at the beautiful couple in love swirling around the space.
How you can tell story through musical transitions and set pieces, basically. That was a really fun process for me, composing that fantasy sequence, creating the whole epilogue out of melodies that were previously in the movie and finding different meanings for those melodies and weave them together and create a new piece, a dance piece. It has no singing in it other than choral stuff. I just love anytime I can take a melody I've composed and use it in a different way.
I think at the end of the Paris waltz, there's still a feeling of like, you know, oh, maybe this could have happened, or like it was still like, it's still there. I think the waltz is kind of that last little bit of shining star of the relationship.
I'm certainly of the opinion that there's something more deeply, almost on a primal level, satisfying dramatically about those love stories that don't end happily or that don't end with the traditional sort of ribbon on top.
They don't ultimately end up together, and it's not entirely clear why, other than the distance, and we sort of are left to piece that together for ourselves.
They're each happily ensconced in the life that they always dreamed of. So they gave each other a gift, and the gift lasted forever. Their relationship didn't, which is not 100% happy, but the gift they gave each other does.
That alternate world, I don't know, it just kills me. It kills me every time.
There are people that help shape us in our lives, and those are the people we remember and love always, and our love for them will never be tainted. That's what the epilogue is all about.
Just because they're not together at the end doesn't mean that those moments didn't happen. And if anything, I think it preserves the memory of those moments in an even more vivid, beautiful way, because in a way, real life can't live up to the memory of those moments.
Big party scene. I wish people could see how that all comes together, because it's very crazy.
We didn't approach scenes from a coverage standpoint, but said, what is a completely unique and ambitious way to shoot this movie?
It's a real contemporary party. Cameras swirling around a pool, and there's dancers all around the pool.
That's one place where design and the architecture and the dancing all really work together.
And then of course you have Damien and Linus who are like, yeah, let's shoot it as like one fluid thing. I mean, come on, it's so awesome.
It'll be fun. It's not gonna be fun.
It could be.
It's not. It's gonna be a bunch of social climbers, all packed into one of those big glass houses.
It begins in Mia's apartment with her roommates.
You got the invitation, you got the right address. You need some medication, the answer's always yes.
Sort of descends on this huge Los Angeles Hollywood Hills party filled with guys in suits and girls in tiny dresses and lots of champagne in this incredibly production designed modern glass house.
Wanted to try, for the first time in the movie, use a musical number to span time and to tell a story that takes place over a greater amount of time than we're seeing on screen. It's a night that starts off with a lot of promise, or maybe a night that starts off somewhat reluctantly, but then kind of seems to gain promise, seems to gain at least a certain sense of fun. Oh no, it's another one of these parties that people you're talking to are checking if anyone more important than you is coming, and everyone is kind of, you know, there with some sort of agenda. In Mia's case, she just can't take it anymore and has to do what I always do at, you know, even parties I like.
Is someone in the crowd the only thing you really see?
Which is, you know, pretend I have to go to the bathroom. And once you have that moment, you reemerge into the party and you realize that you're still just as alone as you were in the bathroom, even though now you're surrounded by people.
Somewhere there's a place where I find who I'm gonna be.
that was the story to tell, it was a wonderful challenge to tell that entire story without a single line of dialogue, just purely through cinema.
And playback.
The party house was a challenge also, knowing that it was a night party sequence with music playback. Damien's vision for it was something with walls of glass.
The location was sort of ideal for this because you're pushing through a living room out to a pool space.
Let's make sure the dancers can get safely around the pool. That all had to be created.
And then there's another building behind it that is a low rectangle with dancers in it.
David and Sandy are amazing, the vision of what they took. They took that house and added so much interesting color.
There's something about the party that has a kind of Bob Fosse sort of energy to it.
That reference, obviously, anything Fosse is like for a dancer, you're like, oh, okay, amazing.
But it's done so with its own grammar and its own vocabulary of dance, so it's fresh and original to our movie.
The challenge in that case was always marrying these older forms of dance to what's happening now, what's new, what's relevant now, and to put a modern spin on this more old-fashioned approach.
Once you love the house, can you pull off the crane shots that you want to do in the pool and above the pool?
Linus was the right DP for this because he was not only willing to go along for the ride, he wanted to make the ride crazier than we'd even envisioned it could be.
Mandy and Damien had been working with the dancing for such a long time. It was really figured out pretty much all of it when I came in.
In order to create magic, you have to take a leap, like you have to go for it. And you either go down big or you come up flying. The track's laid and the dancers are trying to step over the tracks and there's this huge camera and all the guys are moving it. And then you're like trying to count down the flipper guy who doesn't really know the music. And I think flipped something like 14 or 15 times that night, or maybe it was like 25, I don't, crazy.
Everyone ended up being really happy with that house sequence.
I cannot describe just how fun it was to become acquainted with and work with the dancers that our choreographer Mandy Moore brought on board. Each of them at the forefront of their craft.
That was a crazy night.
Here we go.
Come here, man.
How are you?
I've been good, man. When I heard that Damien was making another music-based film, I was excited about the idea.
I wasn't necessarily seeking John Legend out. I was just very lucky. I'd met him in passing. We were on the circuit at the same time, me with Whiplash, he with Selma.
And I was already excited because I had seen Whiplash and was such a huge fan of that film.
Once he actually liked the script, liked the role, I was just ecstatic.
But the more we talked, the more we decided that it made sense for me to play Keith and also to write music for the film.
And I just know I feel so good tonight.
I thought this would be a great opportunity to transition into doing a little more acting in a role that feels pretty familiar to what I already do for a living.
I thought John did such an amazing job because the movie is so nostalgic for another time, for another sensibility in music. For him to kind of bring the contemporary answer to that was so good that made my character's dilemma much more complicated.
I could be on tour with this for a couple years at least, just this record.
Do you like the music you're playing?
Keith and Sebastian would butt heads. Keith's philosophy was, let's not just try to preserve something that happened 50 years ago. Let's take what we've learned and make something new.
It makes it way more complicated because you start thinking like, okay, but what's so bad about being in this band? I mean, you'd be lucky to be in this band. So it brought a whole other level of complexity to the story.
The great thing about John Legend is that he could speak to that kind of debate between accessibility and purity and between tradition and modernity.
How are you going to be a revolutionary if you're such a traditionalist? You're holding on to the past, but jazz is about the future.
But from an acting standpoint, he came in and was so prepared. He was not only gracious and professional, but really blew us away with his just natural talent.
You kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding you. The real challenge was me just developing any sort of chops as an actor. So I spent quite a bit of time with an acting coach and just trying to make sure I felt confident and comfortable getting into this role.
He learned to play guitar for the film. He's known mostly as a keyboardist and vocal artist.
I had to learn how to simulate playing guitar for the film.
Ryan and John joked that it was all part of my master plan to cast John Legend, but deprive him of his normal instrument and give that one to Ryan.
Mine wasn't as high pressure because, you know, the film wasn't about me being a guitarist, but it's about Sebastian as a pianist. I know, the other guy, he wasn't as good as you. But you're a pain in the ass, man. Marius and Justin are the guys that are really in charge of the music for the whole film. We collaborated with them.
So John came up to my studio, Justin and I sat with him.
We had a pretty decent idea for what we wanted it to sound like.
He breezes in and a little late, 5 minutes late. Says, I think I had an idea, and then he disappears into the bathroom. He comes out singing something that is really pretty similar to what the chorus hook of that song was.
I don't know why I keep moving my body.
What they all came up with was really exciting.
I don't know if this is wrong or if it's right.
So it has the DNA of the movie, but also not of the movie.
I don't know if it's the beat or something's taking over me. And I just know I feel so good tonight.
It feels both part of and outside of the film, which is exactly what we wanted.
I don't know what your name is, but I like it. And I've been thinking about some things I want to try.
There's something very real about John, a sensibility that's very real and very laid back. That felt very compatible with the character of Keith.
Clearly this role is not hugely far from who I am as a person, but I think it still takes a bit of work to get yourself mentally prepared to do the job in a way that does justice to the character and to the quality of the other actors that I'm working with and to Damien's vision. It's been really fun doing this, and it's been a great first experience as an actor.
Part of Damien's pitch was, I want to do a love story in Los Angeles about Los Angeles.
How much does Los Angeles play a part in this movie? It's enormous.
The way in which LA figures as a character is so crucial to the movie.
First of all, it's called La-La Land.
La-La Land refers to LA, but also I think it's something bigger than that, and it's a way in which LA is bigger than itself.
It's conflict, and it's compromise, and it's new every time. It's brand new every night. It's very, very exciting.
Everyone has moved here because they have some type of dream.
Somewhere there's a place where I find who I'm gonna be. A somewhere that's just waiting to be found.
To me, La La Land means having your head in the clouds, not having your feet firmly planted on the ground.
Whether it's acting or directing or music or writing or, you know, journalism, I think people are all here because they love films in some capacity. I love it.
But sometimes there's a value to living your life in a dreamland. If we didn't let people sort of drift off into whether it's daydreaming or being unreasonable, we'd have no art. You know, we'd have nothing in this world that wasn't purely functional.
Look at Louis Armstrong. You know, he could have just played the marching band charts that he was given, but he didn't do that. What did he do?
What did he do?
Well, he made history, didn't he?
Well, I'm gonna stop auditioning and I'm gonna make history instead.
Well, my work is done here.
Particularly those of us who love film have an idea of what old Hollywood is in our mind. We've seen photos, we've seen films.
The La-La Land that Damien is portraying in this movie is a very romantic, stars in its eyes kind of place.
As a movie lover, walking through the city feels like walking through the Roman Forum or the Colosseum. The great monuments of old Hollywood surround you.
That's the window that Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman looked out of in Casablanca.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't believe you work right across the street from that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
The most iconic part of Los Angeles that we were shooting in was Griffith Observatory and the planetarium. It was incredible to be there and to have free reign for a little while. Angel's Flight, which is a ride that's shut down in LA, but they reopened it so we could shoot there. And it was just beautiful.
We got to shoot in some of the cooler music venues. The El Rey Theater, which is where I played my very first LA gig as a headliner back in 2004.
And then we had these other great places that we got to explore that I had never been, like Watts Towers.
The Lighthouse, which is a little jazz club down in Hermosa Beach.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Good to see you.
Great little accidents that happen too. When you're there, you realize, oh, this is a wonderful looking pier next to the Lighthouse Cafe.
City of stars, there's so much that I can't see.
And yet it's a city that seems very kind of somewhat, careless and negligent about its own history.
Yeah, so the joke's on history? I don't know. That's LA. They worship everything and they value nothing.
You got to get to know it and you got to sort of get off the beaten path and find stuff. And that was what was so fun about scouting this movie. To surprise you as well, and also to try to present the city as a multifaceted organism.
You always try to find locations that aren't shot a million times.
We're looking at an opportunity to do a movie about a city that we care deeply about. We love LA.
There's so many different facets to Los Angeles and it never stops.
It's really wonderful to find the locations that suit that thread that is in the film.
And I've been living in LA for 8+ years and I'm still discovering stuff that I'd never known existed.
The more you live here, the more you see another side of it that you never saw before.
Our Los Angeles is romanticized, but it's grounded in what Los Angeles is and means to people around the world.
You're acting like life's got me on the ropes. I want to be on the ropes, okay? I'm letting life hit me till it gets tired. Oh. Then I'm gonna hit back. It's a classic rope-a-dope.
It speaks to the duel of Hollywood being both a land of fantasy and wild dreams and where they make movies, and also being a really tough place to live.
I had a very serious plan for my future. It's not my fault. I got shanghaied.
Get shanghaied. You got ripped off.
What's the difference?
I don't know. It's not as romantic as that.
We did want to have our swings and jabs at the versions of LA that I think we all probably despise, whether we live in LA or not.
No. Come on. What?
But within the span of a movie, to build a love letter from that.
It's a very interesting place because it can be a real land of broken dreams, and I think you see some of that sort of element throughout the film, but it can also be so hopeful and life can change overnight.
You gotta give it everything you got. Everything. It's your dream.
There's another side to LA that is absolutely stunning, and it's the reason why anyone who's moved here that I know hasn't left.
Look at this view.
I've seen better.
It's the worst.
Yeah.
There's something really magical about the city that takes a little bit of work and exploration to find because it's such a large city. But if you put the time in, you are rewarded endlessly.
It was a way of actually getting to know the city in a way that I thought I already knew but hadn't.
Oh my. I can take you.
Okay.
Damien really tapped into something that's very real to anyone who lives here, which is that there's such a romantic history of what seemed like a much more innocent time.
There's no place really like it.
Guess I'll see you in the movies.
The lights are all aglow. Oh my god. The town's begun to slow. Stop. The scent of flowers hovers in the breeze. And though it makes you mad, you know it ain't so bad to find yourself so lost at times like these. For isn't it a thrill to be stuck atop a hill, wondering if you'll still be stuck here next year? 'Cause what you call the smog, I call the wondrous fog. And though you think you've had your fill, wait a bit, 'cause isn't it a thrill. You see those purple plumes, I call them toxic fumes. What you call a scent, I call a stench. And I'd happily partake, but my ankles really ache. You could change your shoes while sitting on this bench. Oh, sure, it's such a thrill when your feet begin to kill and you start to get a chill. What a chance for romance. Oh, the night is such a wonder. Is that true? I could offer you my number. No, thank you. I'll stay until I'm sure you will. Just admit, isn't it a thrill?
You never shine so brightly.
Emma and Ryan's previous film history, in a way, is a starting off point with this movie, the same way that the musical as a genre is a starting off point.
Behind these hills, I'm reaching for the heights and chasing all the lights that shine.
It's pure lunacy.
This is the third time Ryan and Emma have been on screen together. Each time they've been on screen before, that chemistry is palpable.
You just point a camera at the two of them and you believe that they're falling in love.
You again. What's your name?
Mia?
Guess I'll see you in the movies.
Part of the appeal to me about Ryan and Emma together in the movie was that you know they're going to be a couple.
I just heard you play, and I wanted to see. It's pretty strange that we keep running into each other.
Maybe it means something.
I doubt it.
Yeah, I don't think so.
You have two actors who have an on-screen chemistry that I think is one for the ages.
It's like Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy, or Fred and Ginger, or Bogart and Bacall.
There hasn't been a contemporary screen couple that's had that kind of chemistry. I think back to Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. There's something alive between the two of them.
Hi, Greg.
They have such a relationship and a rapport and a charisma.
George Michael.
They feed off each other in a really magical way.
Can you grab mine?
My what?
Would you be able to grab mine? My keys?
I can't. You're...
Sorry. Can you grab my keys?
Oh.
Please?
Oh, there we go.
Thank you.
There isn't anyone who's watched any of their films and come away not saying they were so great together.
And the idea here was to embrace the old Hollywood-ness of an iconic screen coupling that we see develop over the course of a few films.
That's the window that Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman looked out of in Casablanca.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't believe you worked right across the street from that.
I love it.
That kind of larger-than-life star system idea of old Hollywood I find incredibly romantic, where you weren't really going to see the characters that Bogart and Bacall were playing, you were going to see Bogart and Bacall. Ryan and Emma, to me, are the closest that we have today to that.
Look at these fellas. Every one of these guys is composing, they're rearranging. It's very, very exciting. Jazz is dying, man. It's dying on the vine, and the world says, let it die. It had its time. Well, not on my watch.
There's no substitute for that kind of respect, admiration, and love. They have a genuine love for each other, which I think comes through really clearly on screen.
You know, there's no one like Emma, and I think she's one of a kind. She's different than any other actress out there, and so you can see, obviously, people have embraced that. She's so talented. Her singing is incredible. She's an amazing dancer. She's just an all-around great performer.
Ryan brings so much, but the thing that I was most excited by is how funny he is. He's really, really, really funny in this movie.
You're fired.
No, that's what you're saying, but it's not what you mean. What you mean is...
You're fired.
Play the set list.
No, I'm saying it's too late.
It's a warning.
What planet are you from?
Don't
You're
fire
done.
me, but don't fire me.
I'm sorry, Seb.
It's Christmas.
Yeah, I see the decorations.
He can dance, he can sing, he's kind of got it all.
Is this the start of something wonderful and new?
He learned to play the piano stunningly well.
And I think that's why they wanted to work together when they read the script. It sort of made a lot of sense for them to be playing these roles together because what I think they knew they just could inherently bring to it.
Where are we?
I don't know.
I wanted to strip away, as the movie went on, some of the veneer and the gloss that we normally associate with Ryan and Emma when they're together and try to show the pain that's underneath, the beating heart that's underneath, the actual kind of spiky electric emotions coursing through their veins as human beings.
You're gonna be on tour for what, months now, years?
Yeah, this is it.
Why aren't you starting your club?
You said yourself no one wants to go to a club called Chicken on a Stick.
So change the name.
Well, no one likes jazz, not even you.
I do like jazz now because of you.
And this is what I thought you wanted me to do. I think we both feel lucky to be actors, to have the opportunities that we have, and we're both equally as passionate about embracing the opportunity and trying to get the most out of it. And so I think we kind of meet on that level.
Yeah.
Look at Louis Armstrong, you know, he could have just played the marching band charts that he was given. What did he do?
What did he do?
Well, he made history, didn't he?
Well, I'm gonna stop auditioning and I'm gonna make history instead.
Well, my work is done here.
Sebastian?
Yep.
All right. Let's play.
Okay. Piano is always something I wished I had had the time to learn, so I was excited by the opportunity. You know, what other job is it a part of your job to just, you know, sit in front of a piano for 3 months and play? It was a great opportunity, so I just took advantage of it.
Actually, literally the first time I met with him about the project was in April, and I think like a day or two after that, he was in full-on piano lesson and dance rehearsal mode.
My name is Liz Kinnan, and I am the piano teacher slash coach slash guru for Ryan Gosling in his role as Sebastian. When I first met Ryan, he made it very clear to me that he was not a pianist. He had played by ear a little bit, but didn't have any technique, didn't read music, but I knew that he was a very musical guy already.
He told me he barely played before he started learning for this film.
It was a very new challenge to teach somebody who had never played piano, jazz piano in particular. So jazz is its own animal, and there are very specific things that happen in jazz that maybe don't happen in other styles of music. He wanted to actually be able to play everything. The time element was not really going to make sense for him to learn to read music. There wasn't time to learn to read and to play all that stuff. So he learned everything by rote. I showed him, he thought about it, he tried it. We went over and over again. He memorized it, and he was very, very committed, as I was, to try to get it as close as possible. We worked together 2 hours a day, usually 5 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week. Sometimes he would videotape me playing it and watch it later.
It was really one of the most fulfilling, you know, pre-production periods I've ever had. I thought in this town it worked on a sort of one for you, one for me type system. How about 2 for you, 1 for me? How about all for you and none for me?
That's perfect, yes.
First day he was playing Jingle Bells.
One of the hardest improvisations occurred on, I think, Ryan's first or second day of shooting.
The second day of shooting was when he started playing a Christmas song, and he kind of morphed into his own world of what drove him.
Told to play Christmas music, doesn't want to play it. Can't take it anymore, and launches into this beautiful melody that he's written that's the love theme of our film.
We did initially think, just in case, have a hand double on set because, you know, obviously Ryan wouldn't be able to, you know, play all of these pieces because they're just, you know, there was too many and they were too hard.
Quote-unquote professional musician who can serve as almost like a stunt double, but for music, you know, for overhead shots or back shots.
We were gonna film in long takes, proving that it was in fact him playing piano.
And then saw Ryan play and realized, nope, no double in this movie. He learned every single note he needs to learn.
And the melody gets more and more complex until it sort of riffs out into a jazz improvisation. And his performance was impeccable. Second day of shooting.
It was a great day. That day was a great, great day. I was just walking on air afterwards. I think everybody was.
I just heard you play. He learned to play the piano stunningly well.
From that day on, there was never a hand double on set. He was dismissed because Ryan, in his attention to detail, in the hours he poured into training, became this fantastic pianist.
In fact, there's not a single, not even a close-up shot of hands in the entire movie that's a piano double. Every single instance you see of any piano playing by Sebastian in the movie is Ryan.
I was jealous, man. I was watching him play. I was like, wow, this guy's really good. And he just learned this in the last few months. It's pretty amazing.
So that was really exciting. If there's a certain level of authenticity to what you're doing, that will rise above. That sort of talent, you know, trumps everything.
Someone in the crowd could be the one you need to know. Someone who will lift you off the ground.
How do you use color and music and sets and costumes, these expressionistic elements of old school movie making, how do you use those to tell a story, an emotional story, a sweeping love story, but updated in a way that felt modern while marrying the musical to real life?
Hearing his vision of this movie and of this world really instantly was very interesting to me.
I was really excited by the fact that Damien wanted to make a film in the style of those sort of musicals from the 30s and 40s. He wanted to sort of have the film have that kind of aesthetic and spirit and sensibility.
David Wasco works with his wife Sandy Wasco, and they are just the most inspiring duo. They designed Pulp Fiction, they designed Collateral.
Damien, he actually drew this chart that started with peaks and valleys where he showed he wanted to go from reality to then heightened reality.
I just heard you play, and I wanted to see.
What blew us away and really struck us about David and his wife Sandy is their passion. They are like 25-year-old kids. They are just so wide-eyed and hungry, not only to please, but to sort of push the ideas further and to bring color and dynamism and detail.
I love it.
They were people who reveled in the challenges of this as a movie, and they reveled in what they had to build. Everything from subtle little touches like lampposts that we would make sure were peppered throughout the movie, all the way through murals that we'd have painted, to more obvious builds like the planetarium set.
Why don't we heighten and take the deco flavor of the outside and just weave it into the inside? There's a new projector in the planetarium right now, and the old one, we found a used one that we're able to rent, so we have the real planetarium projector that was put on a turntable.
In a way, it's why you do a musical. Only a musical really allows you to fully express that emotion. You can't express it with just traditional realist cinema. So yes, they do literally fly into space, and then the epilogue set.
They float out into this fantasy of LA and their life that could be. It came from sort of the magic at the jazz club where the two of them are thinking about an alternative ending where they have gotten together.
Most of the movie was shot on locations, but every location was thoroughly designed, altered.
We sort of enhanced it and brought it into contemporary, but with a little twist.
What kind?
It's a Prius?
I mean, that doesn't help me.
The world at large is a world of a musical. The stuff that isn't sort of bright and poppy is still heightened. It still has an element of fantasy, even if the performances inside of some of those places are a bit more grounded and real.
In all of our interiors, we would really create the whole world, and then the camera can point anywhere.
The Wascos blew my mind. The very first day was the roommate's number. And walking into that apartment was just, I didn't know there was gonna be a billboard-sized Ingrid Bergman on my character's wall, and I was like, well, here we are. This is the world we're in.
You got the invitation, you got the right address. You need some medication, the answer's always yes.
What we do is create this quiet background world that helps tell what the character is about.
The challenge for them was to create an entire world, but to create a world that was baked into real life.
Someone in the crowd can take you where you wanna go. If you're the someone ready to be found.
There was a new set location every day. And once we got into the tempo and into Damien's vocabulary, it became sort of easy to move through it.
It makes LA just look like the most beautiful, glittering jewel box you've ever seen.
We stumbled on a view that's tailor-made for two.
We were painting with paint. Mary was painting with her fabric.
For 2 days, we went through the film scene by scene, myself, the Wascos, and Damien.
Just going through every single moment of the script, purely talking about color.
If there's a Mount Rushmore of costume designers, Mary Zofries is on it.
It was really about using costumes as an expressive tool and using the colors of these costumes as an expressive tool.
That's very much a Damien thing. The use of color and to make it strong and impactful, it is a solid color. And he's right about that. It makes a bolder statement and it's more instantaneous. It's immediate.
The misconception sometimes is in order to have a colorful movie is you just throw a lot of color at it. And actually, if you throw a ton of color on a canvas, it winds up not seeming colorful because the colors just start to muddle each other. You have to pick a lane, basically. And so that's what we tried to do for every single shot.
They fit into the palette and the color and the technicolor and the timelessness and the presence of the movie. It's fantastic.
Timeless with a contemporary sensibility is absolutely what we were going for.
When you look at her clothes, you know a lot about each of the people wearing them.
No, you look so cute in your polyester suit.
It's wool.
You're right, I'd never fall for you at all.
Everything was so incredible. It felt like we were all bringing this very specific thing to life.
The idea for Mia is that she starts off, it's a lot of vibrant color and there's a girlishness to her. And as the movie continues and as she becomes more mature, the color starts to become less important. It's a little bit more desaturated, like to the point where she's in her one-woman show and it's literally black and white. And then we see her 5 years later and it's the same girl, she's more sophisticated.
Here's to the ones who dream, foolish as they may seem.
Those costumes help inform your character a great deal.
Sebastian, he's a little bit older than Mia is. This is his look. This is what he's been wearing for a while, and it's not necessarily trendy. It's not necessarily what every other man walking down the street wears. It's something that he's developed and curated. He buys quality, not quantity.
It's hard with this film to have it have the sensibility of the 40s and of those films that it's paying homage to, but it's also set in contemporary times, so we had to find a way to walk that line so that they didn't feel like they just stepped out of a time machine.
Mary is just this incredibly gifted stylist and historian of cinema.
She has this strictly contemporary understanding and a really deep and rich understanding of history and the way in which clothes have evolved and how that could be married in a way that didn't feel too retrospective nor too connected to today.
She truly is one of the greatest costume designers alive.
I should probably tell you something now, just to get it out of the way. I hate jazz. Are you okay?
What do you mean you hate jazz?
Just means that when I listen to it, I don't like it.
It had to really ultimately stem from the characters. So it was really important to me to tailor it to the character and the specific actor. Marry the old with the new.
You really feel like you've sort of traveled back in time to another era, even though it's still contemporary.
It's not actually just about escaping from reality. It's about using dreams and fantasy to comment on reality and to hopefully articulate even better than a realist movie could what it feels like to fall in love, to have your heart broken, to have a dream, to follow a dream, what it feels like to be human.
Crazy as they may seem, here's to the hearts that break, here's to the mess we make.
There's really 4 lead characters in the movie. There's the characters Ryan and Emma play, there's the city, LA, and there's the music. In this movie, it's a musical, so naturally the music is front and center.
You know, it's a musical, and so we live or die on the music.
If you're gonna have music in a movie, it should be not an afterthought. It should be taken as seriously as any sort of piece of writing in the script because it's as powerful a storytelling tool. There's simply no other art form that is as emotionally direct, that just cuts through the muck right to your heart more than music.
Justin Hurwitz, who did the music on Whiplash, composed the music for this film, so it's this really beautiful, scored.
Justin and I met playing in a band together. I played drums and he played piano. He knew I wanted to do movies, he wanted to write film scores, and so we just kind of were simpatico on that front immediately, and our musical tastes were the same. He wrote the music for Whiplash, and he'll write the music for anything I ever do.
He's written every note of music in the film, the score, the songs, and much of the themes that you hear that are attributed to characters are all Justin's.
And we're so lucky to have his score because it's really special.
One thing that Justin and I talk about a lot that you don't really see in scores anymore is melody. Scores these days, in many cases, are very wary of the power that music has.
Music speaks to me as it speaks to many people in the world. Such a deep way, because music has no filter. It creeps into our souls.
There's something about truly great melodies, not just beds of sound, but great melodies and great orchestrations lifting what's on screen. To me and to Justin, that kind of thing was the ideal. It was the thing we always talked about. It was the thing we bonded over when we were college roommates. And it was kind of the pinnacle we were chasing as we were working on music together.
The goal, compositionally and orchestrationally, for me was always to make something that would be timeless in that it wouldn't sound like 2016, but it also wouldn't sound like I was trying to be 1955 either.
Justin was writing music as I was writing the script. They were informing each other.
One of the big goals for me and Damien, going back to the beginning, was that we were creating something that didn't feel like it was trying to be old-fashioned, that didn't feel like a museum piece.
And that's what we did for about 5 years, was just sort of developing the music and the movie simultaneously.
From the earliest days of the script, Damien had sort of treatments for the songs in the script. You know, there's going to be a song here on the freeway that does this dramatically or accomplishes this narratively.
We just had this dialogue, and it's a dialogue that's continuing even today, and it's just the most fun, fulfilling, creative dialogue I've ever had with anyone.
I love it.
Basically, my process with Damien is I work at the piano. It's always at the piano because we like to hear things kind of in their most stripped down form to sort of assess whether a melody can stand on its own or can really stick with you. If a melody or if music can work in its sort of barest form, if it's memorable, if it's beautiful, if it moves you sort of without all the bells and whistles of orchestration or even lyrics, then it's a melody worth keeping.
One of the great joys of this film was composing the music alongside the development of the script and the other elements.
The first music I composed for the movie was actually the theme of the movie. It was called Me and Sebastian's Theme. It's what Ryan's character Sebastian is playing in the restaurant. It had to be a love theme, it had to be romantic, but it also had to have some real melancholy in it because it's not the happiest of love stories in the end. So there had to be some you know, bittersweet tones in it.
He would send us hundreds of piano demos, and it was just incredible to see these things come to life.
I remember around demo 16 or so, we had one that we really liked. Well, by the time I got to 31, basically, it was the theme, but it was structurally a little different. The theme structurally doesn't change that much, aside from sort of deviating into free jazz when Sebastian plays it at the piano.
I just heard you play, and I want to...
I mean, I practiced some of those piano pieces 4 hours a day for 3 months. I mean, I should technically never want to hear them again. But every time I hear them, I'm still moved by them.
Tim, we want to make sure we're really pushing the horns in 407.
Justin literally lives and breathes music and is allergic to compromise. I mean, he's incredibly collaborative, but he won't sacrifice quality for anything.
You tell Justin something, he will go home and do it 8,000 times until he gets it perfect.
As I was composing melodies, I was thinking a lot about, are these melodies that can work in a score, that can work dramatically, making sure that everything was of a piece, making sure that all the songs would feel like they belonged to the same body of work, to the same musical, melodically, orchestrationally, emotionally.
I should probably tell you something now, just to get it out of the way. I hate jazz. Are you okay?
Tonight we're on a mission. Tonight's the casting call.
Because of the nature of how the project had been set up, you know, Justin and I had been working on it for years and years. And so these songs had become sort of very kind of codified, and these melodies had really sort of taken shape.
Someone in the crowd could be the one you need to know.
So we needed incredibly nimble, adept, sort of acrobatic, lyrical workers who could burrow into what Justin had done and make it feel like it was always intended to be that way.
They were writing to melodies that were by and large fixed in advance, which is enormously challenging.
With the stars aligned, I think I'll stay behind. You've got to go and find that someone in the crowd.
That, of course, the music was set to these words.
You know, we interviewed 5 or 6 people.
But we basically auditioned people with a song and sent them City of Stars, just musically. And we got some really great ideas.
Passing and Paul were the clear winners.
Passing and Paul sent us their first version, and that's essentially what's in the film.
About a year ago in, I guess, August of 2014, when we heard about the guys and heard about the film, and we got involved.
Benj Pasek and Justin Paul themselves are composers as well. They come from the sort of hallowed Stephen Sondheim Broadway tradition of words and music, and they're responsible for both usually. So they understood both sides of the equation, and they were able to really just become this incredible component of our collaborative team.
Benj and Justin are terrific songwriters in their own rights. They are a new contemporary voice to be reckoned with.
It's an interesting challenge to come onto something where there's sort of already pre-existing music that's been written, and our job is to come on and lyricize basically those melodies and the music.
City of stars, are you shining just for me?
It's really actually impressive what they were able to do working within the confines of music that already existed.
We usually write music lyrics together, and we are able to talk about, you know, what is the song gonna say, or what would be a potential title, and then we go from there. But what was so challenging and ultimately really exciting about this was it was like the hardest Sudoku or hardest crossword puzzle that we've ever had to do, because the music is pre-existing.
Is this the start of something wonderful and new?
It's kind of amazing that they managed to come up with so much poetry under those circumstances.
You know, it made us think outside of normal patterns that we would usually think in.
Musically, you go City of Stars, that thing that everybody wants.
It's not about what's the most clever lyric or the smartest lyric or the funniest lyric. It's about what lyric is narratively correct and expresses the character's voice.
They are telling story, they are illuminating character, and doing that within the parameters of these melodies and these songs that musically already existed.
He's created something with the music that is timeless and that I think keeps you on your feet.
There wasn't room really to vary the melody to accommodate lyric. And the story of each song was also very specifically dictated by Damien as the writer of the piece.
Damien is also a wonderful collaborator because he really knows what moments do jump out as being song-worthy. You know, he really identified, I think, moments that where the emotion is really, really high, where characters would naturally break into song and that would be worthy of singing.
Where in another movie you might have a monologue or just a little story becomes this kind of big musical number.
Say there's nothing here, well let's make something clear. I think I'll be the one to make that call.
What's your call?
We had new drafts of the songs frequently, so I would arrange the vocals and then go into Marius' home studio to demo them.
And maybe this appeals to someone not in heels.
And
And we would go to Marius, who was our music supervisor's house, where he has a studio, and we would record, and it was just, you know, all these kind of new experiences that were really fun.
All I can say about Justin Horowitz's songs is that I can't imagine listening to music this much and not being sick of it in any other context. But this, for some reason, it's still beautiful every time I hear it.
That's right, what a waste of a lovely night.
I knew from the beginning that in addition to writing the music part of the songs that I would be scoring it, orchestrating it, which is not always the case in musicals. A number of the score cues are sort of derived from the song melodies that I had written at an earlier stage. My challenge was figuring out how to use some of the melodies from the songs, figuring out how to use that material dramatically throughout the movie under a lot of different kinds of scenes. And I loved, you know, whether I was taking a melody from a song and making it playful, or melancholy, just finding those colors using the orchestra.
Super good on the timing at the end. We need to attack it more at the front.
It's amazing to be here scoring La-La Land on the same stage where they scored Singing in the Rain and all those great MGM musicals.
It's a magnificent room. It's a room which just has so much character and personality. It sings beautifully without ever becoming muddy.
I've never been on a scoring stage this size. I've never been with an orchestra this size. And Justin and I had always kind of imagined that this would be like a 90-piece orchestra putting his music to the screen on this, so it's amazing.
The scoring session was, I think, 4 days of orchestra. The orchestra was 95-piece at its biggest.
I just know that Justin and I always wanted this to be recorded the old-fashioned way, with a big orchestra all together in one room.
The music couldn't have been given a better place to take place and a better context in which to be recorded.
It's one thing to imagine it, it's another thing to actually be here doing it. It's amazing.
Hearing the orchestra for the first time play my orchestrations when they'd been in MIDI for so long is always, it's the most thrilling point of the whole process, I think.
As soon as I stepped in the first day and they were doing some of the big, most complicated charts in the movie, it just took a lift in such a way that I was embarrassed that I'd even liked the MIDI to begin with.
And even when the answer's no, or when my money is running low, the dusty mic and neon glow are all I need.
It is a musical voice that, like Damien, draws upon history and films gone by and music gone by, but comes out in its own grammar and its own language.
It's a musical. It's very much in the style of like old MGM 50s, 60s musicals, a lot of which they recorded on this stage, so I'm very happy to be here.
It's just, you know, humbling to be in this space where there's so much history.
I didn't even realize until a few days before scoring that we were going to be on this stage where they did like Somewhere Over the Rainbow, like a stage with this kind of history. I can't really put into words. It's incredible.
Amazing, because that's of course where, you know, Singing in the Rain and The Bandwagon and all those musicals we love, so many of them were recorded.
These were the scores we were studying, and these were the recording sessions we were studying.
You always think that spaces that you record in, whether it's Bearsville or the Streisand stage, are haunted or informed or sort of somehow inhabited by the history of the music that's been made there. And it's one of those places that just has a vibrancy to it that I'm sure is to do with that those walls have seen.
There's some giants in terms of the ghosts kind of hovering here. It was kind of the feeling I got also during a lot of the shoot, whether on the Warner Brothers lot or shooting in the city of LA, but shooting parts of LA, you know, Griffith or whatnot, where some of those iconic movie moments that we've all grown up with happened. You know, there's something about LA, there's a magic to it, there's that sense of ghosts everywhere in LA that I find really bewitching and enchanting and, you know, perfect for a musical.
Wow, 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 look at this. Sold out crowd at the world famous Chinese Theater in the heart of Hollywood. This is how we roll in the City of Stars. The writer, the director of La-La Land, Damien Chazelle. First question really, this goes back before your previous film. Let's hear it for Whiplash. But this really did start before Whiplash. You had the idea for La-La Land before you even made that film, which really put you on the map. Let's start about what was your inspiration for La-La Land?
Well, it was, you know, I was in college and I and I met Justin Hurwitz, the composer, and we just started bonding over movies and over musicals. And we moved out to LA at roughly the same time, actually, and we just started kind of much like the characters in the movie, schlepping around LA with big dreams and not really, you know, seemingly no real outlet to make those dreams come true. But just this shared passion for musicals, for movies, and the more we talked, you know, the more we kind of zeroed in on a certain kind of musical that we would love to do if we had the chance. A musical that would have big tap dance numbers and, you know, song and dance sequences, but also that would hopefully feel realistic and feel somehow grounded in reality, even though that seems like sometimes not what a musical is. You know, sometimes we think of musicals as pure artifice, but we wanted to try to do something that had some grounding in reality. And we met, I met these two young producers, Fred Berger and Jordan Horowitz, who were out in LA with us, and you know, we pitched the idea to them. They liked it. I think we all kind of realized it was going to be a long road trying to get it made, but we just started doing that. So that was about six and a half years ago now. So I made Whiplash in the interim, and then, whoa, now my voice has a real, real resonance. Because we weren't having any luck getting this off the ground.
Who finally said yes? Like, what studio finally came forward and said, you know what, this is a great idea?
So it was, Lionsgate was the place that, that I have to give them full credit for actually not only, you know, stepping up to the plate to make the movie, but also because at that point we'd started to meet, you know, a few prospective people, and very typical Hollywood terms, they'd start off very positive. You know, they tell you they just absolutely love everything about it, and then they proceed to show that that's definitely not the case. You know, they'd say, "Oh, we love it. We want to do exactly this. We just have a few tiny notes. First of all, it doesn't have to be jazz, right? Okay, that's like a placeholder thing. Okay, got it. Also, obviously, they need to get together at the end. So, could we have a wedding sequence and stuff like that?" And it would just be these kind of, you know, where eventually you'd kind of realize, okay. We're not going to be able to do the movie that way. Lionsgate was the one place that just said, okay, this is the movie you guys want to make. You want to make it in this kind of old, you know, somewhat nostalgic style, but trying to use nostalgia to comment on the present, and you want to shoot it in real locations, and you want to use jazz, and you want to have them not end up together, and yada yada. Okay, we'll let you do that. So that was, it was this rare kind of moment, and we knew how lucky we were, and we just kind of, you know, just tried to take that chance while we had it.
You know, you talk about the tone of the film, the tone being sort of a throwback to appeal to people who love those classic Hollywood musicals of the 50s, but also make it feel current and contemporary. So, you know, moviegoers today will love it, that the millennials will love it. But it is a tone that you're able to walk the fine line from start to finish. What was the challenge of maintaining that tone?
It was actually, I remember one of Emma's first questions. Emma was, you know, I met her to pitch her the movie, and she was very, you know, into it, very engaged, but she had some concerns. And to kind of like, if she were to sum up her concerns, it would basically be, okay, so I'm reading the script and I see, you know, one moment we're like sitting at a dinner table having like a kind of very realistic conversation, and the next moment we're flying up in outer space. How does that exist? How does that work? Yeah, how does that work in the same movie? And that, in a way, that was the question that had to drive the entire movie, all of us, not just the actors, but every department. The solution we found was to try to make sure that every moment in the movie, every frame in the movie was somehow straddling the line a little bit. Exactly. It was never complete, utter realism, but it was never complete, utter fantasy. Ryan and Emma would play everything as though it were grounded and truthful, you know, in other words, not heightening their performance style to fit a fantasy, but trying to really just kind of play it truthfully. And then Lena Sandgren, my cinematographer, David Wasco on production design, Mary Zoffreys on costumes, the whole team would try to kind of find a way of using real LA locations, but heighten them in a certain way, you know? So it just, you'd get a little bit of grit and a little bit of magic in every moment.
So Ryan Gosling, how much of the playing the piano was really Ryan?
Well, on screen, it's all Ryan.
All of it.
So he worked with another jazz pianist, Randy Kerber, a great jazz pianist, and would play along to some of those tracks. And so what you hear in the movie, sometimes Ryan, sometimes Randy, but it had to be, in terms of what you saw, it had to be entirely Ryan. And my first time like seeing Ryan kind of get on the piano, this would be about like 4 months before the shoot. I it didn't inspire extreme confidence in me, because he would sort of like feel the notes out like kind of one note every 30 seconds or something. But he just kind of assured me and assured my composer, assured Justin that, you know, that he would learn it and, you know, he would get it and it would be fine. Meantime, in the back of my head, I'm trying to like think of, you know, plan B options of like CG trickery or like cutting around stuff or like stuff that actually we didn't really have the budget for, let alone stuff I would have wanted to do creatively. And then he just kind of proceeded to start learning these pieces, and it was such a striking kind of like before and after sort of thing, because because again, I vividly remember that first time I sat with him at the piano, and then I really vividly remember a few days before shooting, my kind of last check-in with him pre-shooting on the piano stage. I went in and just wanted to kind of see, you know, okay, just show me, you know, play me where, you know, just play me the pieces, we'll see where you are. And Ryan just sat down and played the shit out of these pieces.
Wow.
And yeah, and that's what's, and it was amazing, and that's, you know, that's what's on screen.
Emma Stone. Emma Stone. Okay, so here in this movie, she does drama, she does comedy, she sings, she dances, she sings while she's dancing, she does romance, she breaks down, she acts like she's acting. I mean, the range of Emma Stone is more than some actors and actresses have in a career, but she does it all in one film. And just tell me about her chemistry with Ryan and her preparation and your collaboration to really flesh out Mia.
Yeah, I mean, between the two of them and all the supporting actors in the movie as well, I think I was just a tremendously lucky filmmaker to be able to film performers of this level. Emma was, I mean, she was a joy to work with, but I think the thing that's kind of unique about her is that she, again, talking about straddling two worlds, she can do it incredibly effortlessly, because I do think she has this like old Hollywood kind of both glamour and also sort of spunk to her, you know, that reminds me of like a Katharine Hepburn or a Carole Lombard or someone like that from you know, older Hollywood romantic comedies. But she's also somehow incredibly modern in every moment, very contemporary, very accessible, very relatable, and so she just kind of became this sort of anchor for the movie in many ways. I mean, both she and Ryan. And it was also this interesting thing of like her playing a version, you know, a character who in some ways is herself, you know, but maybe herself 10 years back when she first moved to LA and was doing the audition route. A lot of the auditions in the movie were auditions that were very much like auditions that she had done in her past, or that in some cases Ryan had done in his past. So a lot of this stuff was very personal, sometimes in a not very, sometimes in a not very pleasant way, because she'd be revisiting painful memories. But she just found a way to kind of, even the stuff that wasn't personal, even the stuff like flying into outer space, she found a way of personalizing, of making everything feel completely human, completely grounded. Yeah, it was kind of stunning day in, day out to see what she did.
What was behind the decision to give Mia like her own, like that she was struggling to do her own one-woman show?
Well, I mean, it was to me, the journey of Mia is a little bit someone kind of, I mean, in some ways it's the journey of both of them. It's why I guess I'm interested in stories about young artists in some cases, this end with Whiplash. It's the journey of people trying to figure out who they are, you know, and what their voices are. So it's not artists who are kind of in the twilight of their careers or mid-career or sort of looking back on a bunch of stuff. It's people who have just really started to or want to launch into, you know, an actual vocation as an artist and are trying to figure out what is going to separate them. Mm-hmm. And so I think she goes through this process of, you know, first she's auditioning for other people's stuff, then she winds up kind of creating her own thing. And even though at the end of the movie we're not sure exactly what kind of projects she's doing, you know, we have the sense that she's kind of been able to find her own voice. And I think that's kind of what the show is about.
Every time I drive down the 110 onto the 105, I'm never going to look at that the same way again. Tell us about filming that scene, the preparation, the rehearsal for the scene that really kicked off the film.
It was, yeah, it was a lot. I mean, it was important to me to, just in general, whether it was the opening scene or not, just to try to capture things that felt sort of uniquely LA, you know, not try to recast LA as a different city. I think actually a lot of the beauty of LA comes from things that are completely anomalous about it. And when I first moved to LA, I was, you know, that would have been about 10 years ago now. I was very frustrated with being stuck in traffic, you know, all the time, and stuck on concrete overpass ramps and all the things that felt to me like, in their own way, somewhat post-apocalyptic. And yet you kind of, I think, or at least I wanted to with this movie, try to find the beauty in even that, you know. And so that's kind of what the opening scene was about to me, at least on a, you know, on a creative level, was let's try to take the thing that even the most ardent lovers of LA will still probably concede is somewhat annoying about the city, and try to kind of find the magic in that. And the sort of way in was just this idea of people listening to their radios, you know, each person in their own little musical universe, each in their own car. And could you kind of treat that as a collection of little disparate musicals that build up into one big musical number? We found this freeway over the 105 and the 110, which I discovered wonderfully when Waze told me to take it as a shortcut, and then I get a ticket in the mail a month later because it's an easy pass ramp. It's a place that has a special place in my heart.
It's also a lot better than driving on the 110 on the 10 and you're getting north on the 405. That's the worst. Sorry.
That's the one I've gotten stuck in the most,
yeah,
actually.
It's horrible.
Yeah. Those are moments where I feel much more, where I much more want to make the opening of Falling Down than this opening, which is just another great LA opening, if any of you haven't seen it. But, you know, so we found this ramp, and it really was, I mean, I have to give, you know, credit to just the team, you know, again, Linus, my DP, Mandy Moore, the choreographer, everyone kind of brought their A game, because just the logistical challenge of it was massive. You know, we wanted to do it for real, you know, so that meant 100+ cars, 100 dancers, and then even stuff that you wouldn't really think about becomes an issue, like how do you do playback up there? How do you run wires up to, you know, your nearest point of any kind of electricities all the way down at the end of the ramp? How do people go to the bathroom is another kind of thing you've got to figure out. You got to figure out where the porta potties are going to be. You got to figure out where craft services is going to be. All this stuff that kind of you don't think about when you're writing on the page, you know, and then becomes something you have to really think about when you're on there. Also, it was a heat wave when we shot, so we were there for 2 days. You know, obviously having to shoot in sunlight. Of, you know, 2 of the hottest days of the year, and our dancers have to dance on car tops, and if you know any, I mean, and everyone knows that when the sun is beating down, car tops don't get very comfortable. So you have these kind of broiling car tops, you've got the heat, you've got the ticking clock, all these things that seem to kind of conspire to make it impossible to do. But I believe, you know, and it certainly was the case here, that sometimes that can just kind of motivate people to find creative solutions. And we rehearsed a lot, and then we kind of got on location, and again, Mandy with her dancers did an absolutely brilliant job, and the camera operators, an entire team of operators did a brilliant job, and we were able to sort of get what we needed. But it was this kind of touch and go, scary but exhilarating process from beginning to end.
The other scene, talk about filming at the right time, getting like the magic hour, is when Ryan and Emma are filming their scene, you know, in the middle of the film, and, you know, it looked like a soundstage, but it wasn't. And it was like, I would say like a 7 or 8 minute scene, all one take, all full body, no close-ups, and it, like, you must have filmed it at just the right time, on just the right day when there was no smog, you could see the sun setting. I mean, how many times did you shoot before you got that right one?
So that scene we did over 2 nights, knowing that we would need more takes than a single kind of sunset would allow us. I mean, the thing with, you know, that scene or any of the scenes that are kind of, I mean, it was similarly when Ryan is on the pier singing City of Stars a little earlier in the movie, or a little later in the movie, sorry. We had kind of figured out, you know, we could time out how long we would have, you know, just based on earlier days. So we had about 40 minutes, you know, at most, I think, before which it would just be normal daylight, and after which it wouldn't be, you know, it would be black sky. Those scenes we would rehearse during the day. You know, I mean, Ryan and Emma were rehearsing that scene all during the summer, leading up to when we started shooting in September. But then we would kind of rehearse with the camera during the day, with the aim of trying to be kind of camera ready by the time the sun started to, you know. But when I kind of look back, and I mean, it's what really amazes me about what Ryan and Emma do is that what you don't see, kind of looking at the scene on the screen, is the utter sort of almost kind of gun to the head dread that's surrounding everything outside the frame, in the sense that you know you know you only have a certain amount of time. Every take you do, the sun is just kind of going down and down and down and down. If they take a little bit too long with a take, that's going to mean one less take you can do. If you get 4 minutes into, it's a single shot, you get 4 minutes into the take, and then, like, you know, like they fall from the bench or something, as you've wasted 4 minutes. And so it's just like one thing after another, and yet Ryan and Emma managed to make it all look completely sort of relaxed and organic and fun, you know? And that, I think, is a real testament to them. It's also a real lesson, I think, that we tried to learn from a lot of the great old musicals, was that, you know, you try to hide the work a little bit. You don't really necessarily want to see the sweat on screen. From Fred and Ginger to the late, great Debbie Reynolds to Gene Kelly, you know, what a lot of these great Golden Age Hollywood musical stars were able to do is just is that it didn't become about technique, actually it just became about emotion, and it became about feeling, and you could just kind of feel that effortlessly. So that was something that was actually kind of wonderful to see Ryan and Emma you know, capture.
You mentioned City of Stars. What was it like the first time Justin played that song for you?
It was, you know, Justin will kind of sometimes give me grief for the number of demos I would kind of ask for of any number of songs. That was probably, you know, it was just called Ballad at the time. It was probably demo, you know, 37BC or something, you know, because it would just kind of get into these subdivisions. And so I think, you know, like with a lot of the songs, we were kind of beating our head against the wall for a while, and then as often happened, you know, a melody would come through that just spoke to both of us. We'd play it for the producers first. It spoke to them. There were no words on it because Justin isn't a lyricist, I'm not a lyricist, so we turned to Benj Pasek and Justin Paul, who are two incredible, well, songwriters, musicians in their own right, became on board as lyricists for this movie, and they're the ones who wrote the words, you know, City of Stars and the rest of the song, and wrote all the words to all the other songs. So it was this kind of step-by-step process. It's not like the song fully formed with words kind of plopped down. But I do remember, you know, it would always start with that moment where you'd hear at least the inkling of a melody that felt like it could sustain, and then it would be a matter of building on that.
I'm going to ask one more question before I open it up to you, the audience. The question that I have is, filming the what if scene is like the best scene of 2016, in my opinion. I mean, it's just gorgeous. Did you sort of film bits and pieces of that along while you were making the rest of the movie, so you didn't have to film that scene all at once?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of divided it into two halves. The first half was just truly the what if, you know, in other words, the sort of, you know, where you'd see scenes that you'd seen before, but now they were kind of skewed a bit. So that stuff we would just be shooting during the shoot, which was sometimes a somewhat, you know, funny process, because we'd kind of, you know, shoot the real version of a scene. And then we'd have to remind ourselves before wrapping up and leaving, oh, we got to do the fantasy version of that. So Ryan, come back here, but this time you smile, and John, come back here, but you're going to do a little spin here, and Emma, and, you know, nothing else would change. It would just be a matter of you know, we wanted to actually keep the lighting, the sets, everything the same, so that all that changed was just the you know, what the performers were actually doing. So that was kind of done throughout, and then at the end of the shoot, we all grouped onto a soundstage. It was the only part of the movie that we really shot on sound stages to do the whole kind of the fully fantastical part of that, with painted backdrops and all that kind of very obvious sort of artifice. And that was more or less how we ended the shoot. Was you know, those last couple days filming with all those dancers and all those paintings that our production designers had put together.
Let's open it up to the audience. Who's got a question? Who's got a question? Yes, you right there.
What's next for you in terms of directing and writing?
Great question. Great question. What is next for you? Damien Chazelle, in terms of directing and writing, I know what it is. So tell us.
That's a big lead up. The next thing, well, so I'm doing a movie about Neil Armstrong and the moon landing, which she'll be a complete departure. Ironically, it was what I met. I met Ryan originally. I've been working on that one for a couple of years now, and I met Ryan Gosling originally to talk about that. And now we look back and joke that I don't think we talked about Neil Armstrong at all at that dinner, because he mentioned casually that he liked Gene Kelly movies, and I sort of leaned in and went, "Oh, really?" Well, I just happened to, and then that him doing La La Land came from that. So
wow.
So that'll be the next one. Yeah.
Great question. Who else has a question? Yes, whatever. You know what? Since you're in the front row, I'm going to give you the mic.
So you kind of talked about when you were trying to pitch the movie, and you ended up kind of Casablancaing us, as I call it. You didn't have them end up together. Why was that so important to you? Why didn't you want the other typical musical ending, the big wedding, and everyone cheering as they run off, just married?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I did want that, but I wanted that in that frame, like in the what if frame. In other words, the sort of idea for me was, I wanted to do a musical that ultimately would kind of play with the form a little bit and maybe comment on what we expect from the form and not necessarily go there and show the ways in which, to me, it was all about how you balance dreams in real life, which as a movie lover, a lot of times our dreams, I think, are kind of refracted through movies, and that's kind of the movie way is how we sort of would love life to unspool. So it did feel to me actually kind of appropriate and it was always the kind of way we envisioned it, to sort of end with a reality that I think, while a very optimistic reality, is not a completely happy ending, and then sort of give you the completely ribbons tied happy ending, but in this through purely fantasy, through this moment that we kind of know is not real.
I also feel like there's something to be said about how the ambition that they had was they were attracted to the ambition that they had to follow their dreams, but that same ambition is what ultimately drew them apart.
Yeah, which I think is, that sort of balance as well between kind of life and work, or life and art, I think interests me. And also I think this idea of two people who, okay, maybe they're not going to be together, they don't have the happily ever after ending, but that doesn't lessen the moment that they had together. This idea of two people coming together, that sometimes you meet someone for even just a fleeting moment in your life, but that person can change everything and kind of help you become who you later become. That idea felt very sort of potent and in its own way romantic to me.
Okay, who's got a question on this side? Yes, you right there in the hat. Yep.
What was the step that changed your life as a filmmaker?
Which one?
What was the step that you took?
Oh.
What was the question?
What step did I take that changed my life as a filmmaker?
Good question.
I think on the one hand, when it comes to filmmaking, I've always wanted to make movies. I can't really. That was I was a very tunnel vision kind of kid, and so I don't have that sort of moment that sort of inspired me to become a filmmaker in the back of my head. But I do know that. I think there was a moment where I kind of realized that making stuff personal was really the way to actually do what I wanted to do. And maybe it had been in the back of my head for a while, but I came to LA and I started doing a lot of sort of work for hire just to kind of get my foot in the door. A lot of writing for hire, a lot of rewriting for hire, and I think there's that sort of moment where you're kind of on the outside of the industry, and I was so desperate to kind of get in that I was kind of probably willing to, if I'd been given a chance to direct something, I probably would have taken anything. And then I think there came a certain moment where I sort of realized, actually, sometimes it's actually good to hold out. Sometimes it's good to actually just focus on what's personal to you. And maybe what's personal to you is super commercial, but maybe it's not. Maybe it seems like something that, like a movie about jazz drumming or something, that seems like something that no one would want to see, but you have to kind of hold on to that if it's what speaks to you. in a way, it seems like an intuitive, somewhat obvious lesson, but I kind of had to learn it for myself, especially living in LA, where I think you can become very obsessed. You can start to think that filmmaking is something that it's not, that it is all about, meetings and paychecks, or, kind of like studio lot visits or whatever. It can start to become very artificial and kind of divorced from what it was when you first wanted to make movies, which is just wanting to tell stories, just wanting to express yourself and kind of regardless of what the outcome would be. I think I had to relearn that once I came here a little bit.
Just got a question on this side. Yes, right there. Nice and loud, please. You. You. Your interest in jazz. Obviously, Whiplash, and now this movie. You obviously have an interest in jazz.
Actually, no, I hate jazz. I have no interest. I was, actually jazz was, well, it happened to be the music that was just kind of playing in the household a bunch, mainly because my dad was just a jazz obsessive, and so I grew up with it playing, and I also happened to be living in a town when I grew up where there was actually a really, for a small town especially, a really thriving jazz community, especially jazz education. Great jazz program in the high school, great jazz teachers throughout. So I just kind of got into it almost by happenstance. But then at a certain point, especially when I started high school, I became really, really obsessed and really sort of dove in. Jazz drumming specifically was kind of was what became my passion, and it's probably the only thing I've ever been as passionate about as movies. I don't play that much anymore actually, but it remains just a passion for me. I mean, that definitely speaks for why I've turned to it as subject matter, a few times. Just loving the music itself, but also being, I think, interested in kind of what jazz means today. And it doesn't have to be jazz; it could be any art form that is sort of that's labeled, that seems marginalized today. Any art form that used to be kind of the popular language of the world and now isn't. What does that do to young people who get into that today? What kind of burden does that put on them? What kind of torch do they have to carry? All those sort of conflicts, all that kind of drama within it, I find fascinating, aside from just loving the music.
Last question. And I need to ask you just because it's just a beautiful scene that really wraps up the film, Emma Stone, here's to the fools who dream. Tell me about filming that scene. How much preparation she did, how many takes you sort of had to do to nail the scene that you used in the film.
In a way, actually, playing a kind of very rough demo of the song, that song for her was, I think, as much as anything, was the thing that made her want to do the movie. So right from the very beginning, way before shooting, she was talking about that number and how to do it, and she wanted to make sure, and thankfully it was what I wanted as well, to make sure that it wasn't going to be kind of overly dressed up, or decorated in a way, that this was going to be a movie that was going to be very kinetic and have lots of stylistic fireworks, but that at a certain point in the movie, and it's when she does that song, everything has to kind of come to a stop, and it has to just be about that song and that moment, and somehow that has to say something about everything else in the movie. It has to kind of be a thesis statement for the movie a little bit. So it was a lot of pressure when we shot the number, and we probably didn't do that many takes of it. Maybe about 9 or 10 takes of it, but they're full takes where she's, I should add, it was all entirely done live. So she's singing live at every moment there, and setting the tempo as well. So there's a little kind of earpiece in her ear, and Justin was off in the other room playing piano. So there wasn't a pre-recorded track or anything for her to sing along to. She was actually, deciding when to go from dialogue to song. He was playing along like an accompanist would, playing along to her tempo. And she just kind of nailed it. I mean, I think we wound up using one of the early takes, but it was one of those moments where, just kind of on set, I think we all kind of knew that there was something sort of incredible happening, at least in my opinion. And yeah, she just really brought it.
Well, to everyone behind this wonderful, beautiful movie, bravo. And here's to the fools who dream, ladies and gentlemen. Damien Chazelle, thank you so much. Spread the word about La-La Land.
Thank you, guys.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Dave Karger. I am a correspondent at the Today Show and IMDb, and was that a magical film or what? It was so much fun to watch it with this audience. You guys are unbelievable. And what a pleasure it is to bring out 4 of the people who brought this movie to the screen. First, I want to introduce one of the film's producers. Please welcome Fred Berger. Here's the 2 guys you already met earlier this evening. The composer, Justin Hurwitz. And the writer-director, Damien Chazelle. And please welcome the star of La-La Land, Emma Stone. Hi, guys. Okay, so Damien, how exactly does one decide that they're gonna shut down the ramp to a freeway in Los Angeles? Where did this come from?
Luckily, I have my producer here who can also help with that, because it was a little bit of a logistical nightmare. It's very easy to, you know, to kind of write down on a page that you know, this big musical number happens on a freeway, but figuring out how to actually do it was obviously a different thing. I mean, what we wound up doing was there's an easy pass ramp connecting the 105 and the 110 that, you know, is just for those lucky few with easy passes. So we were able to shut that down, specifically just that elevated ramp, for a weekend. And we just packed it with cars. And Mandy Moore, our choreographer, packed it with dancers. And we just sort of went in and did it. But I think part of what was fun about, you know, it was very important to all of us to do it on a real location and not have it be done, you know, with green screen or on a soundstage. So, you know, that creates all sorts of problems, obviously. There was a heat wave when we shot it. You know, there's high winds up there, so the camera on the crane is like doing this, and the ramp is slanted. Also, it's not a flat ramp, so you know, that kind of creates all sorts of problems for dancing and camera framing. The truck door, when we needed it to open at the kind of midpoint of the number, decided, of course, to just not open and just break. So we had to like figure out a pulley system to like time so that when the guy seemed like he was opening it, it would open. So all these things, you know, kind of happen that are headaches in the moment, but you do, I think, get something visceral out of just being actually on there and looking down and seeing actual traffic going, and all that stuff was that kind of element I wanted to make sure was in the scene.
Fred, what did the city say to you when you explained this idea to them?
They said, "How much can you pay?" No, it's actually, that specific ramp's been used several times, Transformers and other movies, so we knew we'd have access to it if we'd had the resources. But as Damien said, there was something just extra visceral about actually being on location, having traffic that you see in the movie. In all the other ramps beneath you, you have 360 views of the entire city. It was definitely the 2 best days of shooting, I think, of our lives. I mean, just having that that control of that kind of location, and the cars were all selected by Damien by color and by size, and everything about it was, you know, what's crazy is we were shooting on film as well, so the way the monitors look, you can't actually tell if you're getting it because it's so much little detail in each scene, so we didn't really know we had it until 2 days later.
Oh my God, that must have been stressful when you like push play on.
But it was a joy.
Yeah. How on earth do you even try to rehearse that? How do you find a space that approximates that ramp so that your dancers can plan it all with cars? I mean, it's crazy.
It was, you know, it's, that really was actually one of the biggest challenges, was adapting to the real location in not a lot of time, because, yeah, it's not a thing you can rehearse on location. For the most part, we rehearsed in parking lots. I think Mandy started off by rehearsing dancers in her dance studio, I remember, with just like apple boxes, you know, representing, you know, car 1, car 2, truck. whenever we would go over the camera moves with the, you know, for the crew and everything, just for simplicity, to actually be able to map out the diagram of camera movement, we had like a model, you know, of the freeway ramp filled with Hot Wheels toy cars, and that, you know, and that became our, and we'd like label each one. This is the flamenco dancer, this is the BMX biker, this is dancer number 1. And so all of this is kind of in theory, you know, you get that down as much as you can, but you know that there's gonna be this big leap once you're actually on location. Luckily, Fred was able to, along with our AD, Peter Cohn, was able to kind of carve out a moment in the schedule where we could go to the location, shut it down just briefly on a Saturday the week before, and just do a little bit of a dress rehearsal just to kind of test out things. Naturally, that dress rehearsal was a disaster, and but it was exactly the disaster we needed at that moment to kind of figure out, okay, this is what's working, this is what's not working. We changed the crane of the camera, we adapted some of the choreography, we made little nips and tucks, and then by the time we actually could go in and shoot the real thing, we at least had some idea of what to expect.
Justin, how did it work from your end? You know, the songs and the story just fit so beautifully and seamlessly together. Is that because the two of you worked together so closely on it, or was it a question of fitting songs into specific beats of the story, or fitting a story around songs that were written?
Yeah, we started working at the same time around 6 years ago. Damien was writing the treatment and then script, and I started composing at the same time. And you know, a lot of the key moments that are in this movie were in the very, very first versions of the treatment. So we just started talking about what are the really important moments and what are the really important themes that this movie needs. And actually, I started with the instrumental theme, the theme of the movie that we call Mia and Sebastian's theme. That was the first thing we wanted to tackle because it's so, you know, it's so emotionally integral to what the story is.
That's the waltz that recurs?
The waltz that recurs that you see Ryan play at the piano and then comes back in the score many times. And before we even started on songs, we started with that theme because we, you know, it carries us through sequences like the planetarium, and it's, you know, it has narrative importance and a lot of emotional importance. So we started there, and then, yeah, we just based on, you know, story points and sort of where Damien saw songs or instrumental musical numbers or other sequences that needed, you know, music. Again, he had such a complete vision of it, you know, even at the first stages of the script, that he knew even where score would go. So we started talking about a song will go here, score will go there. In the case of a song, this is what narratively, emotionally it's supposed to accomplish. And I just started composing, you know, melodies and themes, and we started, you know, picking them. It was a long process before we found the right melodies and themes, but, you know, just started picking them, choosing which moments they'd go in, and, you know, structuring them into songs, verse, chorus, whatnot. And then once we felt like they were locked musically, then we would hand them off to the incredibly talented lyricists, Pasek and Paul, Benj Pasek and Justin Paul, who wrote all the gorgeous words.
So great. There's a number of scenes in the movie that come across to me as like total high wire acts. I mean, obviously the opening is one where just so many things have to go right. I'm also thinking about that great kind of magic hour dance sequence, you know, that you and Ryan share. How stressful is that when it's such a long shot in this magic hour period? And maybe there's some digital stuff going on where you can make the sky whatever color you want, or maybe that's you had to do it in a short amount of time. But God forbid you made a mistake 4 minutes into a take. Do you just like, oh, all right, that's it, you gotta start over? Or do you go through the whole thing and then just start again?
We started rehearsing that, I mean, months before we shot it. And we would rehearse in a dance room and you know, work on this, and Mandy would learn our strengths or our, you know, sometimes weaknesses, maybe like for Ryan specifically. I could do everything. But so she would sort of reshape it, and, you know, we realized my character's wearing heels in that scene, so what are we gonna do? And so she kind of added this really sweet moment where I have the bag and we change into flats, and that was all kind of integrated. And then we would go on Saturdays to Griffith, and they would give us a section for a couple hours where we were gonna shoot, and it's on a hill with potholes and all of that. So it's different, you know, in a dance room than it is on that hill. And so we rehearsed that for months, and then we had 2 days to shoot it, an hour each day at Magic Hour, which they roughly found was about 5 takes if we like finished, wiped off our sweat, and then ran back to the bottom and did it again. And second take of the second day, I think you used. But it was at that point, yeah, I mean, I think I fell off a bench. The bench, didn't I step down and back up? Or was that Ryan? That was probably Ryan.
Ryan.
Definitely Ryan. Yeah, it was Ryan. So Ryan, bless him, he's learning. He tries. And so he messed up, but so they couldn't use it. But no, it was, thankfully at that point we had rehearsed enough and really, you know, had gone for it enough that there was nothing too catastrophic.
Fred, as the producer, are you like, oh, time is money? You know, like if these people mess up, then what are we gonna do? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I was really angry at Ryan that day. No, it was actually the opposite. There was a certain pleasure and familial kind of camaraderie that came from the level of ambition that this movie had, sort of at all levels. Just the idea from, you know, as Justin said 6 years ago, to make an original romantic musical about a city that most people outside of LA don't like was already kind of a crazy idea. So from that spirit, we just said, why don't we just make it harder and harder on ourselves at every level? And I remember the day that Damien and our cinematographer, Linus Sandgren, came back, and Linus is this tall Swedish man who's just so excited about everything, and his catchphrase is, wouldn't it be cool, which is another way of saying it, let's make this 10 times harder on everybody. And they're like, if we see night, it has to be Magic Hour. I was like, so we have half an hour to shoot all the single take musical numbers that have to go perfectly. Great. But what it brought out was a certain athleticism of the entire crew. And when we watched that scene, the thing that's always missing from us is the 200 people screaming and cheering when they finish and that it went well in the dailies that we, you know, it felt like a concert or a sporting match every day because the bar was raised so high that people brought their A games, and it felt like we kind of had to nail those, and it was, you rarely get that on a movie set, and it sort of felt like the dialogue scenes were harder because we relaxed in a weird way.
Right, and the one quick thing I would just jump in to add to what Fred was saying is Fred is like the one, the only producer I've ever worked with who would legitimately, you know, like if I'd done a few takes of something and I was feeling kind of, you know, pressure on time or whatever, you know, he would sort of take me to the side and go, just do as many, like, don't tell anyone I'm telling you this, but just do as many takes as you want. We'll find the money, but just don't tell me. Just do more. And I'd go, okay, go again. And that's just like, that to me is like, yeah, it's I mean, as a filmmaker, it's the best thing to hear ever. It's actually, you know, the rarity that you know, he actually pushed me more than I even would have pushed myself in many of those instances. And yeah, so thanks, Fred.
Very nice of you to say, Damien. I remember day one, I will say, we shot the roommates' interior single take number, and they just were so well rehearsed that Emma and the roommates nailed it immediately, and we wrapped 2 hours early, and I pulled Damien aside and said, don't you ever do that again. Just keep shooting.
Emma, the audition scenes are just so cringeworthy. It's just crazy. But I would imagine that they must ring true to you. When you think back in the days when you had to audition, do you think, like, do you remember situations like that were just so incredibly awkward in an audition?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think the ones that I remember the most are kind of the one where she gets the call back and then it's just the cut off immediately. They're like, thank you for coming in, okay. That is a pretty frequent experience, I think, for many auditioning actors, that they know right away they're not going to use you, so they just let you go. And you've prepared for a long time, and it's pretty heartbreaking. And then the scene at the beginning, not to bring it back to Ryan, but the one in the beginning was Ryan's actual experience, because Damien was asking us, he was like, all right, you guys, come on, let's be cathartic, let's make it productive. What were your worst auditions? And Ryan had this story about him crying in the middle of an audition, like doing a monologue, and a phone rang on the table, and the casting director answered the phone in the middle of him crying and had a conversation and then hung up and was like, continue. And he was like, well, do I keep crying? What am I supposed to do? So that was kind of a variation on that actual real life story that happened, of course, to Ryan. Like, that's never happened to me. Right. It's so crazy. Like, it's always come really well, actually. I don't remember anything bad.
But there's so many layers to that because that scene also has to get across to the audience that Mia is quite a good actress and has the talent. So that must be hard. You had to do a good job acting as if you're a good actress.
That was kind of something, yeah, we had a lot of discussions about that too. Like how, you know, at the beginning, if you can feel that there's something to this, you know, that there needs to be something to this woman, that she's been, you know, doing this, and that she has something to give in that way, and really, you know, but then also it was kind of fun because later on, the idea of the callback scene was meant to feel very forced and pushed. Like there was a lot of, you know, stuff on top of her, and I think he was, you know, Damien was amazing about kind of calibrating that so you could feel that it's not just like every audition she's nailing and people are being dismissive of her. It's sometimes, you know, not going well at all because she's putting way too much pressure on herself.
Damien, this is your third movie as a director. Of course, I'm sure a lot of people here saw your last one, Whiplash, with J.K. Simmons. I totally wanted more J.K. Simmons in this movie. I'm just gonna say that, but that's okay. But if there's one thing that your three movies have in common, of course, it's jazz. What's that about?
It's just this personal, I guess, connection I have to the music, probably mainly from growing up. You know, my dad is French, and he moved to America, you know, for work, but also I think in large part because he, growing up, was so obsessed with 20th century American music, particularly jazz. So growing up, there was jazz playing in the house all the time, and he would be telling me, you know, some of the stories that Ryan tells Emma in the movie, or that J.K. tells Miles in Whiplash about whether it was Charlie Parker or Sidney Bechet or Dexter Gordon or whoever. And so I grew up kind of mythologizing jazz, started playing it pretty young, got really into it. So I don't have a better answer than that in a way than it was kind of there at the outset for me. But I remember when I met Justin, we met freshman year of college playing in not a jazz group, it was like a rock band. We thought we'd be rock stars, and it didn't really pan out, but we talked, very early on. Well, two things we bonded over. One, we bonded over movies, and kind of that's quickly how we decided that we would do movies together, and because he wanted to do movies, music for movies. But he also, you came from a classical background, I came from a jazz background, and so I think at the same time I was turning Justin on to Coltrane, he was turning me on to Bach and, you know, Tchaikovsky, and I feel like that's actually, at least where a lot of this movie lives, is in, you know, at least to my ears, what Justin was doing here was really taking a lot of that jazz language, also a certain kind of pop sensibility as well in the songwriting, and then orchestrating it like, like Tchaikovsky or Debussy or something like that.
Justin, given the fact that you guys work so closely together, how much time, if at all, did you spend on the set?
Oh, I was on the set any day there was music, which was most days, because between the songs and Ryan's jazz and trying to make sure Ryan wouldn't screw up the jazz too much, because he's screwing up everything, you know, keep in mind.
It's really, but he's such a nice person.
Yeah,
it's really nice as a person.
But
which is great. It's important too.
No, I mean, joking aside, he was, the work Ryan did was ridiculous. He was in piano lessons 6 days a week for months leading up to this. So everything was like a well-oiled machine, but it was just good to be there and lend an eye and sort of have, you know, a musical opinion, you know, when things needed it. And then, of course, there were two songs that were sung live on set. So Emma's song, Audition, Fools Who Dream, she sang that completely live.
Please.
And the City of Stars duet, also completely live. So yeah, those were songs where Ryan and Emma just sort of drove the songs, and I was in the other room playing piano, kind of into their ears on an electric keyboard, and letting them just guide the song. And they'd both, you know, rehearsed it quite a bit in the you know, leading up to the shoot, just to get the notes, to figure out the keys with them, and to sort of get it in their bones. But I think they were you know, Emma can talk about this, but I think they were kind of saving themselves, and, you know, particularly with audition, kind of, you know, saving it for the day to really go to the place emotionally where you went. So it was a new experience on the day, and we didn't know what it was going to be. And seeing, you know, that performance, to see it, you know, acted the way she acted it, and just to be there to sort of accompany it was really kind of an unbelievable experience.
You must have had that date circled on your calendar, like date where I'm going to be shooting audition.
Yes, definitely.
And how did you psych yourself up for it?
I think it was just, I just knew it was coming. I mean, I worked with a wonderful voice teacher named Eric Vitro. They set me up with him for the movie, and he was so helpful, and we just rehearsed with Marius, and then we did, I think, I always say 9 takes, and I think that's correct.
Wow.
I'm not sure, but I do remember it was actually one of the early takes that,
Oh, really?
that I think we used in the movie. I just did the others.
So I just kept singing.
Exhaust you.
Yeah, cool.
No, but it's that kind of thing, like what Fred was saying. You know, sometimes you, especially shooting film, you know, and with the budget we had, we knew we didn't have really the budget for reshoots in any real way. So we would always try. Kind of our rule of thumb was to try to get 2. Like for any of the long takes, to try to do 2, 1, you know, make sure we had at least 2 that we felt like, okay, we got it, that can be in the movie. So 2 perfect takes. But I do think the take we used of yours was actually, which I guess makes sense, it was one of the rawest, and it was early on, maybe take 2, take 3, something like that.
Fred, how did you guys know that John Legend could act so well? Because he's great.
He is great, isn't he? This is the first time he's ever acted in a movie. That's a really good question. I don't know that was the sort of threshold. I mean, he's so charismatic and has such presence. And Damien sat down with him a few times, and everything in this movie sort of started as, wouldn't it be amazing if we had actors like Ryan and Emma in this movie? Okay, so we're not going to get them, so let's see who we can get. And, you know, 6 years ago, we did a little rip reel that Damien cut together, and it's all of them, and they were the sort of pinnacle, and then somehow we suckered them into doing the movie. And John Legend was sort of the same thing. It's like we knew we wanted someone from the music world who had this natural charisma and also had a musical talent who could feel, you know, he has to convince Ryan to do something against his own instincts, but you don't want him to be a villain. And John has that natural charm and sincerity, and can also speak to being a jazz musician and to the roots, but also I think he delivers that speech about moving the medium and the music form forward in a way that is uniquely him. And then he sat down with Justin and our music team, and in 2 hours, they were just supposed to meet and hang out and talk and just get to know each other and see if they could collaborate. And after 2 hours, they came out with Start a Fire, that Echo song. And it was so damn good and so perfect sort of narratively for what the movie had to be, which is just good enough that you believe Ryan's character would play it, but just bad enough that you would believe that Emma would be pissed at him for doing it. And then we had to cast him because he had the song. So, but no, he really did the work, and he's just part of the family, and was just an amazing guy in every way.
And Emma, I'm so intrigued by, well, there's 2 moments that really get me with your performance. One is when you're sitting at the dinner with Finn Wittrock and figuring out that you need to get out of there, and there's so much going on in your face and your body language. But then also in that scene that Fred's talking about where you're in the audience, and there's a whole story being told on your face. But it can't have just been Mia reacts in a little bit of horror at this music she's singing. It had to have been more choreographed than that, almost like a dance, all the different things that were going to go on in your facial expression. What was that like, the preparation for it?
It's the other way.
We found the fault. We found the fault.
Am I alive? Yeah, I'm here. I'm trying to remember the kind of
I guess there wasn't actually, I don't remember there being actually that much kind of preparation specifically for, like in a way I think you just intuitively got it. I think in the script it was written, you know, as, especially that scene where the latter scene, the John Legend scene, you know, the various degrees were kind of written out in the description of, you know, Mia first is shocked, then kind of tries to enjoy it and realizes this is fun, and then it starts to get a little more Then suddenly it's a little more produced and dancers are showing up and it's just becoming less and less Sebastian. And but I don't know how much we actually, I mean, it's,
Yeah,
again, it's
I'm trying to remember how much we actually talked through. I mean, I know on the speaker, you know, it was very much like, and the song is beginning. But that, beyond that, I don't know that you were like shouting out.
I mean, one great thing in the I remember in the restaurant scene was that was kind of lovely to do because that was another instance of having Justin, in that case, not another room, but just kind of around the corner in the restaurant playing a piano. So essentially what you're hearing, you know, in that scene is what was being played live on the set, so Emma could really react to that. And then when she ran out, we blasted the score from speakers.
Yeah, running down the street. And that actually, that's a really great point. In both of those scenes that you talk about, there are these big sweeping kind of musical situations going on, and I was hearing the music that whole time. And you sometimes hear about actors, I don't know if you guys have heard about, there are some actors that are like, have been in it for a while, and they wear an earwig in the middle of scenes. Have you heard of this? There's some prominent actors that I guess listen to music while they're shooting scenes in films. And you've heard of this, Fred, right?
I have.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just to loosen them up. And a lot of the time in this movie, it happened to be that there was score or Justin playing live in our ears. And so, you know, that obviously takes it to a different place.
Damien, can you speak to the number of shots that we see where your characters are in front of these beautiful, like, murals or, you know, gorgeous placards or posters? What kind of story are you telling with all of those?
I mean, it was something that I've always loved about LA and wanted to celebrate and showcase a little bit, was that it's like this city full of signs, whether it's, you know, the Art Deco lettering on top of older LA buildings or billboards everywhere, or, you know, old murals. You know, like one of my favorites is the mural that Emma walks by early in the movie of all, you know, which is in Hollywood, of all the old Hollywood stars sitting in a movie theater looking at you. So it's a city that kind of comments on itself in its own art. So I really kind of wanted to, that just felt like something to definitely take a hold of and celebrate in this movie. But then actually a lot of the other kind of images in the movie, you know, like certain murals were done by our production design team, by David Wasco and his team. And, you know, it would just be a case of, we'd see like a big blank white wall that Ryan was going to sip coffee in front of, and I would ask David, you know, it'd be really cool to have like a kind of old-fashioned orange ad, like the way they did in the 20s when LA was all about orange groves. And then David's team would mock it up, and that's the mural that Ryan sits across from. So we tried to do a lot of like both using what LA had to offer, but also sometimes expanding on it as much as we could and trying to just make it as richly kind of, painted a city as possible.
Let me ask a couple final things. Emma, you recently did Cabaret on Broadway. Do you think that experience was necessary to give you the confidence to take on a film like this? Quick learner.
I think it was, I mean, it was absolutely so important. Damien and Justin came to see Cabaret while I was in it, and I didn't know that they were there. So it was my unofficial audition that I later got to freak out about because I had no idea they were watching that night. And then it was, I think that experience of doing something 8 times a week for that long is obviously, if anything, just kind of stamina building. So going into rehearsal for this, I wasn't tap dancing or ballroom dancing in Cabaret, but learning that was, you know, much more fun, and I probably felt like I was a little bit more remotely in shape than I would have been before.
Fred and I met on an airplane a couple of months ago. We were sitting next to each other. When I found out he produced La-La Land, I was like, I just have to ask you one question. And it was about this whole idea of having to choose love or choosing to follow your dreams. And I think the movie has a lot of interesting things to say about it. Where do you guys all land on whether that's a necessary compromise or whether you can do both? Start with you, Fred. We'll go down the line.
Well, I think what I said to you, I think we were drinking on that flight, but I think what I said is I don't think the movie's saying you have to make a choice. I don't think it's saying you have to have one or the other. But I think there's a couple things that are really beautiful and moving about it to me, and I think the movie also, you know, the movie took a long time to make, and we started it before Whiplash was a thing, and the movie's very much about our struggles and our hustle to come here. And I think everyone along the way has first loves, but also has people who inspires them and are muses and who sort of sets them on a path to where we get to. And I think what I love about Sebastian and Mia is they wouldn't end up where they are without each other, and they'll never forget each other. And there's something perfect about something that's finite, and Damien says this very eloquently. And I remember when we first met him, there were three, you know, there was no script, there was no treatment, it was just jazz musician, actress falling in love, trying to make it, and they don't end up together, they cannot end up together. And there is, if you look at great love stories, they rarely end up together because there's something, you know, happily ever after means you gotta sort through real life. There's something kind of so perfect about Sebastian and Mia's story, both in the way they can remember it in that final montage, as well as what they provoked in each other and what they brought out in each other. Ryan was able to sort of have that club because of Mia. That's why, like, I start crying when I see that Seb sign every time, because that's her, you know? And I think the same is true of Mia's character, of believing, the reason you sing in that scene is because Ryan tells you to be yourself, you know what I mean? Says, and allows you to trust in your voice. And so I don't think it's about having to make that choice. Just in this case, they didn't end up together, but their lives are richer because they knew each other. And that's ultimately, to me, what I take away about the sort of fusion and cohesion of love and our aspirations.
Anybody want to add to that?
I'm just going to pop in and say I could not answer that better than Fred did just now.
I agree. Whatever he said.
Yeah.
It's good by me.
So
I wasn't listening, but I feel like
it sounded good.
It was long and
it sounded good.
Good job. Good job.
So I'm ending with the most important question. Emma, did you already know by heart all the words to I Ran So Far Away by a Flock of Seagulls, or did you have to study them for the film?
Well, luckily, it was only really the first kind of verse and chorus of I Ran, so I had that down. Yeah, no, I had it down.
I cannot congratulate the four of you enough. Emma Stone, Damien Chazelle, Justin, Fred, congratulations. You guys are an amazing audience. Thanks so much. Thanks to Airbnb and everyone who put this event together. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you so much,
guys.
Thank you.